Ito said, well, do you waive your right to, he said, do you object? And he said, well, she said, I'm not sure we object, and it seemed to be a little unclear about what their position was. And then Judge Ito pointed out a provision of the law which would allow him, under his interpretation, to do that. And I think they will go ahead and do that. But that's basically, it was a technicality as to whether or not Judge Ito could just remove himself from part of it and then continue on.
Greta Van Susteren, based on what will happen with the other judge, and clearly Judge Ito has indicated, in his opinion, based on the incredible number of transcripts, he is estimating 7 to 10 days for the other judge to get up to speed on these issues. And as you said earlier, he is placing the burden on the attorneys to bring that judge up to speed to a great extent through their briefs. But if Margaret York is not a material witness and the tapes are brought in, as therefore the prosecution couldn't use her on rebuttal, would that mean then that Judge Ito could hear the rest of this case?
Absolutely, Jim. I mean, that's the whole issue that will ultimately reach. It sounds like those tapes will come in, and that's my prediction. Obviously, Judge Ito is terribly anguished about the situation, and I don't blame him, but he made a smart decision. He cast the decision to be made by a judge who doesn't have a personal involvement, and I certainly applaud Judge Ito for doing that, and hopefully the other judge will make a ruling in very quick order, and the lawyers will do their homework to facilitate that, and they'll come back and we'll then proceed with the trial.
Roger, clearly Judge Ito was pained by having to make this decision. He said that he loves his wife dearly. He is wounded by criticism of her, as any spouse would be, and it is reasonable to assume, at least from an appearance standpoint, that this could have an impact on his decisions. What is your guess as to what could happen?
Well, first of all, I think all of us had to, by now you feel like you know Judge Ito, and even if you don't, because we've watched him so long, and clearly this is a man who has a great deal of conscience and tries to do the right thing. Let me just tell you briefly what I tried to say before. The problem is this. If the testimony indicates, if Furman's tapes indicate that he had all of these run-ins with Captain York, and Captain York has now signed a declaration saying she doesn't really remember any problems that she had with Officer Detective Furman, the prosecution may want to call her as a witness to say, see, he was just talking as a fictional character. He never really meant this about his own personal way of viewing things, because if he did, these things that he described that happened with Captain York, she would have to remember them. So the fact that she doesn't remember them, and she signed a declaration saying that she doesn't have any particular recollection, that shows that he is talking as a fictional character. And I think, and this is just guesswork, Greta, I don't know, but I think that's what the problem is here.
Or it shows he's a liar.
Or it shows he's a liar, depending on what she says. But the problem is, you see, they could conceivably bring her in to say, gee, I don't remember any of these run-ins with
but what the funny thing is, Roger,
with him.
I'm not even sure why these run-ins are even relevant. I mean, the issue about whether he used a racial slur is relevant because he specifically denied it on the witness stand. Whether or not these sort of other issues come up, whether or not he's in the business of planting evidence, all depends on the cross.
Let me quote Marcia Clark in her argument just a few minutes ago. She said, one of the incidents involving racial undertones includes Captain York. It would therefore make rebuttal extremely germane. It goes right to the heart of this issue. The prosecution would therefore be forced to put that on in response to these tapes.
But Jim, only if that portion of the tapes comes in, if this other judge makes that decision, and that decision will be predicated on the fact whether or not Detective Furman was confronted with it last spring. You can't just go off on these sort of wild goose chases. We're talking about impeachment, and there's a very good chance that the only thing that will come in will be his statements about using the racial epithet, because that's clearly in conflict with his testimony.
See, but
the
Greta,
other stuff may be too far afield.
But Greta, if he comes in, and let's just hypothetically say he comes in and says the following, he said, oh, that's right, I said those words, but that wasn't me talking. That was me speaking fictionally, and it was so far from my mind that I really didn't think that that's what you had in mind. I was talking as a character in a novel. See, look none of this really happened. Here's Captain York. She's going to come in and tell you that none of this happened. This wasn't me speaking. Now, is it a good answer? Is it a bad answer? Well, that's for the jury to decide, but it's an answer, and I think that's what they're worried about.
We have to take a break. Once again, Judge Ito has sent the matter to another judge. The attorneys for the prosecution and defense are now going to Department 100. There are two issues to be decided. One, the issue of the Furman tapes themselves, whether they are admissible. Two, whether Captain York Judge Ito's wife, is a material and relevant witness for rehabilitation. Judge Ito has recused himself or removed himself from this case with respect to those two issues. We're going to take a break and be right back.
About meeting that special someone.
Sorry, can't help you there.
I want to know more about a diet I can live with.
No way, not in this commercial.
I want to know more about Rogaine.
Rogaine with minoxidil?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay. Just call this number now for a free information kit on Rogaine topical solution. It could help answer your questions because it's filled with all kinds of facts about Rogaine. And because you need a prescription to get Rogaine, we'll send you a list of local doctors and special money-saving offers to help you decide if Rogaine is right for you.
But I want to know right now.
We'll mail it to you today. So what are you waiting for? Call now for your free information kit. Call 1-800-446-9333.
Now there's a new hearing aid for Miracle Ear. So advanced, it's virtually invisible. Now you see it. Now you don't. It's the new Mirage hearing aid for Miracle Ear. Call now. We'll send you these free booklets that tell you how the virtually invisible Mirage may help you hear better. If you call 1-800-203-2600 right now, we'll also send you this free videotape, Hearing Loss and You. It'll show you the most common causes and solutions for hearing loss. And we'll include the free booklets about the new Mirage hearing aid from Miracle Ear. You see, Mirage is our most advanced hearing aid that fits completely into the ear canal. It's not only small, it's virtually invisible. Call Miracle Ear at 1-800-203-2600. We'll send you important new information about hearing loss and the virtually invisible Mirage.
It's amazing. I know he's wearing it, but I can't see it.
So call Miracle Ear at 1-800-203-2600. Call now.
Everybody has morning breath. Unfortunately, not everybody has scope.
Presenting TBS Award Wednesday. This Wednesday, America Goes to War. The biggest night of movies on television. TBS Award Wednesday, 8:05 Eastern Wednesday, only on TBS.
A dramatic day in the Simpson trial, effectively bringing the entire trial to a standstill. Judge Ito has recused or removed himself from deciding two issues in this case. One, the admissibility of the so-called Furman tapes. And since those tapes apparently contain Mark Furman's references to LAPD Captain Margaret York, Judge Ito's wife, the second issue the judge has recused himself from considering is whether Captain York is a material and relevant witness for purposes of the prosecution's rehabilitation. Let's listen now to a portion of the judge's ruling.
All right, under our Code of Judicial Conduct and also the Code of Civil Procedure, judges are under a direct statutory and ethical obligation to decide all issues that are presented to them. I am very reluctant to send this matter out to another court for two reasons. One, it is an incredibly onerous burden to ask another court to make this determination, both from the point of view of the voluminous record that that court would have to review in order to be in a position to make an intelligent ruling. But it is also perhaps one of the top three most difficult decisions to make in this particular case. In this case, there have been several decisions that this court has had to make that have been difficult decisions to make. And this is an extremely difficult one that I was not looking forward to having to make. Having said that, the canons of judicial ethics and the Code of Civil Procedure do not give to trial court judges the benefit of the doubt. And when a concern is raised regarding a court's ability to be fair and impartial, it is not the actual existence of impartiality or partiality that is the issue, it's the appearance. I would love my wife dearly. And I am wounded by criticism of her. As any spouse would be. And I think it is reasonable to assume that that could have some impact. As I mentioned, women in male-dominated professions learn to deal with this, and those who are successful, I think we all observe, are tougher than most. But having said that, the appearance of a reasonable concern that this court could impartially rule on these material issues is there. And I feel I have an obligation then to recuse myself from two issues. One, the scope of the impeachment that is available of Mr. Furman through these tapes, because one might suspect that this court would have a motivation to punish Mr. Furman and thereby make wider the scope of impeachment. Someone might reasonably be concerned about that. One might also be concerned that this court, in trying to express its impartiality, would bend over backwards the other way and restrict it. In either event, there would be concern about this court's ability to act impartially in this matter. I therefore recuse myself from the issue of the tapes themselves, and specifically whether or not Captain York is a material and relevant witness for rehabilitation and or impeachment of Detective Furman, as the case may be. This matter is therefore, this particular issue is therefore transferred forthwith to Department 100 for reassignment. I'm going to order counsel there forthwith for the purposes of selecting a court to hear the matter, to schedule the matter, and to set up a briefing schedule.
Our San Francisco Bureau Chief Greg Lefebvre is attending that meeting in Department 100 where the attorneys for both sides have been sent for these two issues to be reassigned to another judge, and we will of course bring you up to date as soon as that meeting is over. Right now let's go to Greta Van Susteren. Greta, you heard Judge Ito's words. It was clearly difficult for him to come to this decision to recuse himself, even as to these two issues. He's clearly mindful of the fact that it could ultimately lead to his recusal or removal from the case entirely.
Oh, absolutely, Jim, and I'm sure that he won the heart of every single wife in this country who listened to him talk about how much he loved his wife. But, you know, the problem is that a judge is oftentimes called upon to make a difficult decision, and when there is an appearance of impropriety or someone could think that he could be partial to one side, he has no choice but to recuse himself or disqualify himself, and he's doing that for these two limited reasons. And obviously he doesn't want to declare a mistrial, but he feels that perhaps someone would think that he was biased, and I think it's a good decision on his part.
Roger, clearly the defense wanted these tapes to be brought in. The prosecution didn't even know about them until after, or didn't get them until after the defense. Do you think that both sides are reluctant to use them? We heard Marcia Clark offer a stipulation to the defense that Mark Furman had used the N-word on several occasions for 3 different years.
I can tell you this, that Marcia Clark wishes these tapes would somehow disappear and end up on Mars someplace. Is Johnny Cochran and the defense reluctant to use them? Absolutely not. And should they be? Absolutely not. They should have these tapes and be fighting with the judges and everyone else they have to in the prosecution to play these tapes. This is what their job is. They should try and get these, do everything they can to get these tapes in front of the jury and impeach police officer Detective Furman if they are able to do so.
Roger,
one other thing I just want to say this, Greta. You know, we've heard a lot of criticisms about lawyers and about how bad everybody is back in this trial, but I think what you saw today was perhaps the best of lawyers and judges when you saw Judge Ito make that agonizing decision. And I know that we are under a lot of criticism, but today you saw a good human being agonize over a very tough decision and do the right thing.
But you know, Roger, the thing that struck me as sort of odd is how Marsha Clark at the end said, after the judge decided to send the 2 issues to another judge, that she wondered whether he could sort of disqualify himself in piecemeal, whether there was authority for it. And I tell you, I was a little bit suspicious, like she was trying to provoke a mistrial, because you would think that she would be happy, because that's what she asked for. She asked that the judge not decide the issue. Then when he did essentially what she asked, she said, "Oh, Judge, I'm not so sure you can do it in piecemeal." And I tell you, I was a bit suspicious that she wasn't trying to provoke a mistrial in the case.
Well, Greta, I don't know if she's trying to provoke a mistrial, but I can tell you that, as you know, they're just sick about these tapes, and they just got stuck with these tapes, and they have this Furman who is just absolutely up there saying one thing, and apparently on these tapes it just absolutely contradicts them, and they know very well the damage these tapes can possibly do. And they're, on one hand, they're trying to do the best they can and to keep these tapes out, but they know how bad these tapes are. And at this stage of the game, I think they'd take anything they could rather than have these tapes get in front of the jury.
Even a mistrial.
The attorneys are in Department 100 right now, hopefully getting another judge to be assigned to hear these 2 issues. And court in the Simpson trial is expected to reconvene in about 25 minutes. We're going to take a break and be back with more right after this.
Tonight in the Crossfire, could Mark Furman's remarks about Judge Ito's wife cause a mistrial in the Simpson case? Crossfire, tonight, 7:30 Eastern on CNN.
We're first in Bullet. Bullet Federal is now First Federal Savings Bank, and that's good news for you. It means expanded and new services from one of America's strongest and safest financial institutions. It means fast approval and competitive rates on loans for any purpose, and new products like bonus banking. And it means ownership stays right here in Central Kentucky. What you've liked at Bullet will be even better at First Federal Savings Bank. You've got a great bank right here at home.
It's Kart Country. Hold everything. Kart Country still has the first and longest go-kart track with an overpass in Kentucky. But now they offer Thunder Road. Not for the weak at heart. Thunder Road. One of the largest, fastest go-kart tracks in the United States. Thunder Road. Only at Kart Country. Just south of the airport off I-65. Exit 117 Shepherdville, just past Ponderosa.
Go ahead and read.
Don King on Larry King Live tonight.
Once again, a major development today in the Simpson trial. Judge Lance Ito has recused or removed himself from deciding 2 issues. One, the admissibility of the so-called Furman tapes secured by the defense from North Carolina from Laura Hart McKinney, who was writing a screenplay. And second, whether Captain York, who is Judge Lance Ito's wife and who is apparently mentioned by Detective Mark Furman by name in those tapes, is a material and relevant witness for the prosecution to rehabilitate Mark Furman. Let's now listen to a portion of the argument made by Johnny Cochran where he makes some more revelations about those tapes.
We have checked these tapes out, and there are at least 30 times when the so-called N-word is used to refer to either suspects, regular citizens, city council people, anyone in disparaging terms. There are at least 17 instances in these tapes in which Detective Furman admits or approves of planting, manufacturing evidence, lying, or covering up police misconduct. At least 17 instances. And in one instance, he describes himself as a key role in covering up a situation, Your Honor.
Well, Mr. Cochran, forgive me for interrupting you, but this is sort of the offer of proof that you need to make to the person who will make the materiality call.
Well,
so I thought you were going to propose another method of evaluating that issue.
Well, I will do that, but I'm saying to you, once you hear this offer of proof, it's back to our additional position I made this morning that there's no reason to send it out. And if you do send it out, then send it out only, here's what we propose. Assume, arguendo, that based upon this, the 30 instances of where the N-word has been used, or at least 17 instances where this officer has talked about lying, covering up, beating people, and that sort of thing. Assume that that is relevant, okay? Then, under that scenario, let them argue that Margaret York is material. Because you're going to say, we're going to waste all this time. I mean, in L.A. County, I can't believe the Board of Supervisors are hearing this. They must be really shocked out of their minds, because how could you then pull a judge off another case, ask them to read this entire transcript for something they will never be able to get in? This is a waste of time. And it's ironic that we're the ones bringing this up, it seems.
Mr. Cochran, here's the problem. The problem is this. They raise the argument, they raise the issue that because the court is now aware, based upon the offers made both by you and by Ms. Clark, that Mr. Furman has made comments disparaging of this court's spouse, would a reasonable person with those facts suspect that the judge might have difficulty in being fair in evaluating the materiality of impeachment testimony with regards to the person who was alleged to be making these disparaging remarks?
Well, let me answer that. Well, you know what? When I told you this morning how this man disparaged everyone, went back through the transcripts also. Well, you're not going to be able to send it, it seems to me, necessarily to people in this county. Let me read something for you. Quote, may I, Judge, I'm up to discussing. May I proceed? May I proceed, Your Honor, please? Every judge of the Superior Court and Supreme Court, I don't know what the Supreme Court or the Superior Court says, and I really don't give a blank. That's how he refers to Superior Court judges in this county, and to politicians and everyone. He has something for everybody. So, I mean, it may be your wife, but he has just as little regard for Superior. I suppose that a judge who sits and listens to that on the tapes, and I quoted from the tapes, they're not going to be very pleased with this man either.
But the problem is my wife is apparently referred to by name, by rank, and by
she is?
Assignment, contact with this person.
She is, but I think that he also refers to Superior Court judges in this county. He has no respect for anyone. So well, I'm just pointing out to you that it's not going to be easy for you. If you want to send it to a woman, he doesn't like them. You want to send it to a black, he doesn't like them. You want to send it to a Mexican, he doesn't like them. He doesn't like anybody. Doesn't like Jews, doesn't like anyone unless they're white Anglo-Saxon police officers. And
you heard Judge Ito refer to Margaret York. That is his wife, the LAPD captain, who is the highest-ranking female in the LAPD, and she has become the focal point of these tapes. You see her here now on tape. According to the prosecution and the defense, both of whom have listened to the Furman tapes, Mark Furman apparently makes various derogatory statements about her. Let's listen now to Marcia Clark's response to Johnny Cochran's argument today in court.
With their insistence on the use of these tapes to put into evidence one of the biggest red herrings that has ever been seen in the course of jurisprudence, they have forced us to litigate an issue that directly involves the spouse of this court in multiple ways. And whether there is actual bias and whether this court will be able to actually set aside its bias is no longer an issue because the appearance has been created. And so what we are talking about at this juncture is that there is no ability to sever the issue and say, this is it, and we'll take only this issue out and then come back. Because the situation that has been created now is that all rulings with respect to Furman witnesses become suspect in view of what we know to be the case in terms of allegations made by Detective Furman. Certainly it's framed squarely and completely with respect to the tapes and the issue of their admissibility. And then, of course, again, with respect to the admissibility of rebuttal testimony by Captain York. but it spreads out to all the witnesses that would be called concerning Mark Furman. All rulings at that point will be looked at from the point of view, well, we know why he let the witness say that. After all, he knows what Mark Furman said about his wife or all female officers. That's the situation we're put in now. Very unfortunate. I offer the defense again an opportunity to try this case on its merits and on the evidence that's relevant to the facts, that is relevant to the events that pertain to the murders of these two human beings, and that if they feel it's necessary to vilify Mark Furman, surely the biggest red herring that ever was, the people offer to stipulate that he used the word in 85, 86, and 87. And I think that fairly gives them the opportunity to impeach him on a matter that is collateral at best, and yet would allow us to proceed with this trial without the need for total recusal. I take it by Mr. Cochran's rhetoric that a reasonable alternative such as the one I've suggested would never be acceptable to him. But I make it nonetheless.
The person who's become a lightning rod in this case clearly has been LAPD Detective Mark Furman. He is the detective who you see here on your screen. He scaled the wall at Simpson's house on the morning of June 13th, 1994. He found the glove, the bloodstained glove, behind OJ Simpson's estate at Rockingham. And he was also involved in that 1989 incident where OJ Simpson pleaded no contest to spousal abuse. The attorneys, we are told, are in chambers at this hour in Department 100 with Judge James Basque. They will go into open court to put the matter on the record. There are no cameras allowed in that courtroom. However, CNN Bureau Chief, San Francisco Bureau Chief Greg Lefebvre is in Department 100, and as soon as the announcement is made in open court, he will bring us a live report. Let's now talk to our legal analyst. Greta Van Susteren, any reaction to the argument that Marcia Clark made? Do you think for a moment that she wants Judge Ito to be recused and to be forced to possibly declare a mistrial?
Jim, you know, I think her actions today make me extremely suspicious that she's trying to provoke a mistrial. These tapes are explosive and could really destroy the prosecution case, and it may be that she wants to provoke a mistrial to prevent that. And one of the things that really disturbs me is the fact that she asked that the case be sent to another judge to resolve these two issues. Judge Ito did it, and then the first thing she said was that she wasn't sure that he could do it in a piecemeal, that he might have to recuse himself for the entire case, which would ultimately result in a mistrial, because if he takes himself off the case, there's no way another judge can be appointed. This simply is too long. The other thing that's rather odd about this, it seems that, well, I don't have any information exactly what it is that Margaret York would possibly add to this case, but it seems that Marcia Clark is concerned about sexism. And the problem with Mark Furman is whether or not he is a liar. And of course, there's some racial overtone because the alleged inconsistent statement involves racial slurs. But it's almost like she's mixing apples and oranges, because sexism is not racism, and it certainly is not credibility.
Roger Cossack, Judge Ito does not seem to be concerned as much about the prospect of a mistrial. He did cite an earlier case that went to the Court of Appeal here, apparently in California, where a judge became very ill in a capital case. Another judge replaced that judge, and the conviction was apparently upheld. But the question I have for you, the offer to stipulate by the prosecution where they contend that Mark Furman did in fact use the N-word in 1985, 1986, and 1987, isn't that tantamount to admitting that Mark Furman lied on the stand?
Well, let me see. He said on the stand in 1984 that that in the last 10 years he has never used that word at all, period. So it seems to me that if he has used that word, he has some explaining to do.
We are going to take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.
When I got rid of my gray hair, I wanted a natural look, so I didn't take any chances. I used the sure thing for a natural look, called Just for Men.
Apply Just for Men, and in 5 minutes, rinse. It's specially timed to blend away gray, bring back your natural look, and condition hair.
It's a sure thing.
Just for Men, the sure thing for a natural look. And now try Just for Men Color Gel for the hard-to-color hair of mustaches and beards. Brush in, rinse out. Just 5 minutes.
A sparkling ship on crystal waters is coming.
Absolutely gorgeous. It was so much fun.
The perfect lobster is coming.
Our readers, they would do anything for us, any time.
Perfection is coming.
It's like a gift from the captain.
Memories are coming. 7 days in Royal Caribbean's Mexican Riviera are coming. You've got some Royal Caribbean coming.
It's not about saying cheese anymore. It's what doesn't go according to plan that makes the best pictures. Try Fuji Color Quick Snap Plus one-time use cameras, because life won't stand still while you go home and get your camera.
To unlock the full, there is a solution. Come to Office Depot now or call us and we'll reserve a copy for you. That way you're guaranteed a copy of Windows 95 when they do go on sale, while everyone else is scrambling to buy theirs.
Taking care of business.
Out from behind bars and into the ring, Mike Tyson from where he begins his comeback. Larry King live from Las Vegas, Wednesday night, 9 Eastern on CNN.
Court in the Simpson trial is slated to resume in approximately 10 minutes. At this moment, the attorneys for both sides are in Department 100. They were in chambers with Judge James Basque. They are going to go into open court to put the matter on the record. No cameras are allowed in the courtroom. However, CNN San Francisco Bureau Chief Greg Lefebvre is in Department 100. He'll bring us up to date as soon as possible. The moon rose in the Simpson case yesterday. The prosecution filed a motion to have the judge instruct the jurors who may take a nighttime trip of the crime scene that on June 12, 1994, the moon was a crescent with 12% of its surface illuminated. Now, if the judge grants the motion, it would allow the prosecution to partially impeach one defense witness. Ellen Aronson testified that the moon was full when she walked by Nicole Brown's condominium and did not see any bodies. The defense objects to the night field trip. Judge Lance Ito gave the attorneys for both sides until tomorrow to address the objections. However, it's not clear whether that is now on hold, given the fact that Judge Lance Ito has recused himself with respect to two issues in this case. One, on the admissibility of the so-called Furman tapes. Two, whether his wife, Captain Margaret York, who was apparently mentioned by Detective Mark Furman by name in those tapes, is a material and relevant witness for the prosecution for purposes of rehabilitating Mark Furman. Let's listen to a portion of the impassioned plea Johnny Cochran gave to Judge Lance Ito earlier today to keep this case moving with Judge Lance Ito at the helm.
I think that the court has already, in fact, reviewed certain internal affairs files on Furman, I believe. I'm pretty sure about that. I know you conducted a hearing regarding the district attorney's office and their prep session of Furman, where they're all present, they sat around and, you know, in the grand jury room. So you've done those things. I mean, there's so many things that you've done already. Nobody was worried about any appearance of conflict at that point. Your wife at that point was, I think, assigned to internal affairs. We didn't raise any issue at that point because we've trusted you, Judge, all along. I don't know where their trust went along the way. All of a sudden, they're worried about some appearance, and the appearance doesn't even show up at this point. Mr. Simpson, if the court would allow me, wants this court to be aware of the fact that certainly he, along with all of us in this courtroom, his heart goes out to the families and the victims of this case. He is also a victim in this case. And so when Marcia Clark makes those statements, don't for 1 minute misunderstand our sensitivities. And we've tried to conduct ourselves in a way throughout regarding the families of these victims. But we have a man who from the very beginning has maintained his innocence. And he is troubled by what the so-called authorities have done to hide and cover up for this Detective Furman. Somebody out there, Judge, should do something about this cover-up. Somebody should do something about all these files that have been hidden and sealed. This is still America, and that's unfair. And we think it bears directly upon Furman's activities in this case, other cases, and it has a direct bearing on OJ Simpson's innocence. And he has maintained and continues and will maintain his innocence till the day he dies because he believes that the facts will show that, and in fact, he is innocent. He wanted me to indicate that to the court, that there's not any lack of sensitivity at all on our part at all. But he too has become a victim in this rush to judgment. And so he wants his day in court, and we want to proceed and do that.
This controversy, the renewed controversy over the so-called Furman tapes, came to light yesterday in sidebar transcripts and also in an in-chambers conference, the transcript of which was released today. A portion of that transcript reads, Judge Lancito saying, let's circle back to what the legal issues are. The legal issues are, one, is there a conflict for me to hear this stuff? That conflict would be raised because according to attorneys for both sides, and remember, Judge Lancito has neither received the transcripts of these tapes nor heard the tapes himself, and he's relying on the prosecutor and defense who claim that Margaret York, Judge Lancito's wife, is specifically mentioned by name by Mark Furman in various disparaging remarks. Marcia Clark responds to Judge Lancito's statement right. Judge Lancito says this has a significant legal issue because we may be talking mistrial. Marcia Clark, I don't think so. It just has to be referred out like it was before. Johnny Cochran, it's not that easy, and Judge Lancito says it's not that simple. It is not that simple. Secondly, it's a double problem because he is disparaging, he being Mark Furman, of A, my wife, and B, of an internal affairs where my wife is now the commanding officer. A double whammy here, and it is that double whammy which prompted Judge Lancito to recuse himself or remove himself from determining the admissibility of those tapes and whether his wife, Captain Margaret York, the highest-ranking LAPD officer, female, is a material and relevant witness in this case. Incidentally, we're waiting for court to reconvene. It's scheduled to reconvene in the Simpson court under Judge Lancito in about 6 minutes, and we'll, of course, bring it to you live when it does. Greta Van Susteren, are you ever surprised by what you see here? Clearly, there have been so many dramatic developments in this trial. This must be the most dramatic so far. It's brought everything to a halt.
Well, it certainly is dramatic, Jim, but the truth is every trial has its twists and turns. This one just seems to be more interesting because it's on so long. But that's what fascinates lawyers so much, is that we never know what's going to happen in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and who knows what's going to happen at the end. And I think that's why it's so addicting, is because it's such a roller coaster ride and lots of surprises.
Roger, the prospect of a delay, and clearly Judge Lancito was talking about a 7 to 10 day delay just to bring the next judge up to speed on 2 issues only, and that's the admissibility of those tapes and Margaret York. It reminds us of the fact that there are 2 alternates remaining, and this trial has been going on for many months, and there is still the prospect or the specter of a mistrial given the fact that you could run out of jurors.
Well, yes, that's right. And I wouldn't want to have to be the person that breaks it to this jury that there may be a week's delay because we have to send out thousands of pages of transcript for another judge to read to decide this issue about tapes coming in or not. This is like Greta says, in every trial, and we both have a lot of experience in these things, there's always twists and turns. The witnesses get up and say things that you've never heard before, that you've never expected. Developments arise. But I must tell you, this is by far the strangest trial that I have ever seen, and maybe, Greta, you're right. Maybe if this is one of those things where if it just goes on long enough, something weird will happen that outpaces everything else. But this has been a particularly unusual trial, and I guess that people should never really get the idea that this is the common everyday way that trials are run or that the way they unfold, because it just has been very unusual.
Greta, Johnny Cochran wanted the judge to instruct the jurors that this delay is not the fault of the defense, and the judge seemed to agree with him.
Oh, judges always do that because they want to make sure that the jury doesn't get mad at one side or another. There are always all sorts of legal problems that come up during the course of the trial which require the jury to sit. Usually it's for a matter of hours and not days. And so the judge will always give some sort of bland instruction saying, look, don't blame either side, blame me, it's my fault, and we'll see you in a couple hours. This particular case we'll see in 10 days maybe.
Greta, are you surprised that the prosecution offered to stipulate that Mark Furman used the N-word in 1985, 86, and 87, in essence admitting that he lied on the stand with respect to that question?
Not at all. If it means stipulating to the evidence, may be a lot better than listening to the tape. You know, we haven't heard that tape, but the minute a prosecutor or any lawyer gets up in front of the court and says, look, I will stipulate that my witness lied so I don't have to have the tape played, you know that tape is extremely powerful and explosive, and she does not want that jury to hear it.
Roger, if the purpose of the tape is to show that Mark Furman lied, why isn't a stipulation satisfactory? Why wouldn't another judge simply say, if the prosecution is offering a stipulation, we don't need to hear the tape at all?
Well, because it's much more than just the fact that he has said some words that he wasn't supposed to. There's attitudes, there's bias, there's prejudice, there's his feelings about what's right and what's wrong. There's the phrase in there where he talks about what police officers do. It's part of their job. If they see someone who they think is bad, it's up to them to plant the evidence because it's a bad person and they have to get them. There's all kinds of things in there. It's much more than just the use of that vicious word. And plus the fact, you know, Jim, this is a trial and both sides want to win. And the kind of reaction you get from a jury from just hearing a bland stipulation that would say the defense and the prosecution agree that in 1985, 6, and 7, Detective Furman used a bad word, that's nothing compared to hearing these words in his own voice.
Jim, it's just riveting when you're sitting in the courtroom and you hear the tape, when you hear this person actually make the statements that he flat out denied that he made before, and it is really riveting for the jury. It's much like the videotapes we've seen.
I hate to cut you off, but we are out of time. We have to take a break. We'll, of course, be back with live coverage of the Simpson trial when court is back in session. It should be any time now. When we come back from the break, we'll have a news update.
Guilty. Not guilty. Weekdays this fall, the burden of proof rests on CNN.
Go ahead and read what's on the screen.
iMart Family Vision Care.
How about now?
iMart is different from those crowded vision centers. At iMart, you deal directly with the owners, Dr. Terry L. Goodman and Bob Thompson.
That's right. I'm Dr. Goodman.
And I'm Bob Thompson.
Here at iMart, we believe in customer care. Come in and ask about our special. Buy one, get one free, going on right now.
So visit us at either location.
Last Saturday, my wife Lisa and I went shopping. You know, we're not paying any attention. That's when it hit me. What would happen to our family if Lisa weren't around anymore?
Recently, I've been trying to get Dave and Lisa to review their life insurance.
We then called Kim. She's our nationwide insurance agent.
Now Lisa has the coverage she needs.
Thanks to Kim, I don't worry about what might happen.
For all of your insurance needs in Bullitt County, call Nationwide Agent Jim Marsh.
Don King on Larry King Live tonight.
As Jim Murray reported a moment ago, we are awaiting the resumption of the OJ Simpson trial, and in the meantime, this news update. For those just joining us, I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington. For those just joining us, there's been a stunning development in the OJ Simpson trial. Judge Lance Ito has given a portion of the case to another judge. It involves the potentially explosive taped statements by a controversial police detective. CNN's Ann McDermott brings us up to date on the trial's latest twist.
The trial of O.J. Simpson is picking up an additional judge after an emotional Judge Lance Ito decided he had to turn a trial matter over to another jurist, a matter that involved Ito's police officer wife.
I would love my wife dearly. And I am wounded by criticism of her. As any spouse would be. And I think it is reasonable to assume that could have some impact.
The judge's wife, Police Captain Margaret York, once worked the same division as now retired detective Mark Furman. Furman is the officer who found the bloody glove at Simpson's estate. He is also the officer the defense wants to impeach as a liar and a racist by playing tapes in which he is heard using racist words, something he swore earlier this year he didn't do. But those tapes, made in collaboration with a screenwriter for a work of fiction, also contained derogatory comments about Captain York. OJ Simpson's defense team insisted that Judge Ito could still be fair, and attorney Johnny Cochran added he would not seek to introduce any tape that mentioned York.
You know these facts. We rely upon you. Mr. Simpson relies upon you to be fair and give him a fair trial. This jury relies upon it. All of America relies upon this.
But prosecutor Marcia Clark said although she too believed the judge could be fair, there remained the appearance of a conflict.
And yet we cannot possibly say it would be fair to require this court to set aside its knowledge of the fact that some inflammatory statements were made about the court's spouse in ruling on an issue of this delicacy and sensitivity.
Clark then declared that the tape should not be introduced into evidence at all, that even if they do paint Furman as a racist, they do not indicate, as the defense would have it, that Furman ever planted evidence.
There is no cover-up going on, Your Honor.
Cochran said the point is Furman lied, and the defense believes if Furman could lie about using racist words, he could lie about planting a glove to frame Simpson.
They've got to face up to this fact. This is their star witness. They vouch for him. We prove he's a liar. They know he's a liar.
However, another judge will make the decision about whether or not the jurors will ever hear any of the tapes. Ann McDermott, CNN, Los Angeles.
We continue to await resumption of the Simpson trial. While we do, in other news today, Oklahoma City bombing suspects Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were taken to federal court today for the first time since being indicted. The courtroom is just across the street from the building they are accused of blowing up in the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil. CNN's Tony Clark has that story.
Surrounded by police, highway patrolmen, and U.S. Marshals, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were whisked into the federal courthouse. For security reasons, they were arraigned separately. McVeigh stood straight-faced in the courtroom, his hands clasped behind his back as the charges against him were outlined. "Sir, I plead not guilty," he said. A few minutes later, it was Terry Nichols' turn. With his mother, brother, and other relatives sitting in the courtroom, Nichols proclaimed his innocence.
Terry's reaction is that he pleaded not guilty in a clear, strong voice, and we look forward to getting back to work.
James Nichols sat in the back of the courtroom during his brother's arraignment. James was initially held as a material witness in the bombing investigation, as well as on other unrelated explosive charges. The charges against him were dropped the same day the indictment was brought against his brother.
My gut feeling. I didn't do anything. He didn't do anything.
How about Timothy McVeigh?
I want to see some facts.
The front row of the courtroom was filled with people who work at the courthouse, while Terry Nichols' family sat in the back.
But once again, we have seen graphic evidence that it is inappropriate and unfair to ask the people of Oklahoma City and the personnel in this courthouse to sit in judgment upon these events.
We cannot get a fair trial in a city where the judges knew people that were killed, and where you look around and it appears until very recently a war zone.
Meanwhile, a new twist has been added to the mystery of the severed leg found in the rubble. There are 3 dots on the bone near the knee, and investigators don't know what they are or whether they'll help in identifying the victim. The state medical examiner's office says even the most sophisticated tests may not determine whose leg it is. Defense attorneys want their own forensic experts to take a crack at the mystery. Tony Clark, CNN, Oklahoma City.
The so-called king of deadbeat dads will spend at least 3 more nights in jail. Businessman and investment advisor Jeffrey Nichols, who eluded authorities for 5 years, was sent to jail yesterday. He'll stay there at least until Friday, when child support negotiations are scheduled to continue. Nichols, the father of 3 children, owes $500,000, but says he's broke. Hurricane Felix is spinning toward the midsection of the Atlantic coast, threatening to damage beachfront properties from South Carolina to Delaware. Today, thousands of people were ordered to evacuate islands in North Carolina. States of emergency are in effect for the coasts of North Carolina and Virginia. Pounding surf from the unusually wide storm forced the closing of beaches to swimmers as far north as New York and even Maine. For more on where and when this storm will hit, let's go to CNN meteorologist Dave Hennon. Dave?
Judy, we have the latest advisory off from the Hurricane Center, and the warnings have basically remained the same from the 11 a.m. advisory. Let's show you that right now, show you where the latest warnings are. Hurricane warnings are in effect from north of Little River Inlet in South Carolina to Chincoteague, Virginia. We do have now, though, from the 5 o'clock advisory, a tropical storm warning in effect. That from north of Chincoteague, Virginia, back up to Manasquan Inlet in New Jersey, and this does include Chesapeake Bay, north of Windmill Point, and also all of Delaware Bay. As you can see by our satellite picture, the system looks a little bit more organized. Actually, we can begin to see the formation of an eye again, and that means the system is strengthening once again as it moves towards the west. We do expect that to continue, that trend anyway. The storm is getting into some more favorable conditions, and it is also going to be moving into some warmer waters along the Gulf Stream. The forward progress of the storm is still pretty fast. It's still moving about 16 miles per hour. The official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center does slow this storm down tomorrow, so we do not expect landfall until sometime tomorrow night. And again, the most likely spot for landfall looks to be right around the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Let's show you a different satellite perspective. This is a little closer up. This is visible satellite imagery. So what's happening and why this is getting darker is because the sun is setting over the hurricane. But again, you can see distinctly the eye of the storm. Here is Bermuda, located out here to give you a point of reference. The storm drifting west-northwestward, and there are several Hurricane Hunter planes which have been flying into the system throughout the late afternoon hours. So as we head through the evening hours, we'll continue to get an idea of whether the storm is strengthening or not, and we will keep you updated as those reports come in. Judy?
Dave, just one question. We keep hearing this is a storm that's wider than usual. Does that say anything about the ferocity of it?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Judy. And the reason that the National Hurricane Center issued the hurricane warnings so early were because the hurricane force winds extend out of this system 140 miles, which is kind of unusual. So we will begin to see, we think, tropical storm force winds along the Outer Banks sometime during the morning hours tomorrow. And by tomorrow evening, we could easily see hurricane force winds along the coast. So that is why the hurricane warnings have been out so early. And this, yes, is a pretty large hurricane.
All right, Dave Hennon in Atlanta. This is one we're going to keep a close eye on. Fans, friends, and famous faces from the world of baseball packed a church in Dallas, Texas today to say a final farewell to Mickey Mantle. Mantle was an extraordinary baseball player, but today the people who spoke of him made it clear they believe he was much more than a great athlete.
Look at this marvelous gathering. This is what it looks like to be loved by America and beyond. We gather remembering, mourning, celebrating, and thanking God for Mickey Charles Mantle, for his life, his playing, the way he cared for us and led us and inspired our world. Thanks be to God for this life. God, keep him in death and give him life forever.
In the last year, Mickey Mantle, always so hard on himself, finally came to accept and appreciate that distinction between a role model and a hero. The first, he often was not. The second, he always will be. And in the end, people got it. And Mickey Mantle got from America something other than misplaced and mindless celebrity worship. He got something far more meaningful. He got love. Love for what he had been. Love for what he made us feel. Love for the humanity and sweetness that was always there, mixed in with the flaws and all the pain that racked his body and his soul.
Yesterday, when I was young, the taste of life was sweet. As rain upon my tongue, I teased at life as if it were a foolish game. The way the evening breeze may tease a candle flame.
Mickey, you remember your day in New York? You had heard me use a little poem called God's Hall of Fame. It says your name may not appear down here in this world's Hall of Fame. In fact, you may be so unknown that no one knows your name. The trophies, the honors, the flashbulbs here may pass you by, and neon lights of blue. But if you love and serve the Lord, then I have news for you. This Hall of Fame is only good as long as time shall be. But keep in mind, God's Hall of Fame is for eternity. This crowd on earth, they soon forget the heroes of the past. They cheer like mad until you fall, and that's how long you last. But in God's Hall of Fame, by just believing in His Son inscribed, you'll find your name. I tell you, friend, I wouldn't trade my name, however small, that's written there beyond the stars in that celestial hall, for every famous name on earth or glory that they share. I'd rather be an unknown and have my name up there.
There are so many songs in me that won't be sung. I feel the bitter taste of tears upon my tongue. The time has come for me to pay for yesterday when I was young.
Mickey Mantle was 63 years old. The White House is welcoming an apology from Japan's Prime Minister for the suffering caused by his nation in World War II. The history-making apology comes as Japan marks the 50th anniversary of its surrender in the war. CNN's Mei Lee has the story.
While thousands were offering their prayers for Japan's war dead on the 50th anniversary of the end of the war, the Prime Minister was making history by offering a clear apology to victims of Japan's past aggressions.
In the hope that no such mistake be made in the future, I regard, in a spirit of humility, these irrefutable facts of history and express my feelings of deep remorse and state my heartfelt apology.
Mr. Murayama is the only prime minister to issue such a strong statement about Japan's war crimes, one that goes well beyond a resolution adopted by Parliament in June, which only expressed deep remorse. Although the prime minister was speaking on behalf of his administration only, there are signs of support from the public. Even here at the War Memorial, many Japanese veterans say it's time to come to terms with the actions of the past.
Even after 50 years, people say we haven't apologized, so we really should.
We should sincerely reflect on what we did to neighboring countries during the war.
Legendary war veteran Saburo Sakai, too, feels Japan should apologize. He was the highest-scoring Zero fighter ace during World War II. Sakai shot down 64 Allied planes in more than 200 dogfights. In one skirmish, he was shot in the head twice. Sakai lost his right eye and was temporarily paralyzed on his left side, but he managed to fly nearly 5 hours to safety. 5 months later, he was back in the air, shooting down 7 more planes before Japan surrendered to the Allies. But even with all of his wartime successes, Sakai says the pain inflicted wasn't worth it.
After the war, we realized what we had done was wrong, but during the war, we thought it was the right thing. When I think about the many people I shot down and how they could have led a good life if it weren't for me, I get very emotional.
And those are not empty words from Sakai. In his home, a small shrine dedicated to those he shot down. And there, within the clutter of artifacts from the past, is a small statue of the legendary fighter ace, which says, as adversaries make history, history makes friends. Mei Lee, CNN, Tokyo.
In Thailand, veterans and others gathered at the bridge over the River Kwai to grieve for those who died there during World War II while in Japanese custody. 16,000 Allied prisoners of war and an estimated 100,000 Asian laborers lost their lives building the infamous railway linking Thailand to Burma. Britain marked the end of the war in the Pacific with quiet ceremonies. Beyond the wreath laying, there was evidence of residual bitterness toward the Japanese, particularly from former prisoners of war. Thousands of veterans are demanding reparations from Tokyo, charging that they were systematically mistreated and used as slave labor. In Australia, there were parades and street parties to commemorate the 50th anniversary of VJ Day. And Prime Minister Paul Keating welcomed Japan's apology for its wartime actions. We still expect the OJ Simpson trial to resume at any moment, but in the meantime, we'll be back with more news after this.
Let's see what Templeton is up to. What's this? I knew it. Champagne? Lobster? So, you thought you could just slip a first-class ticket by me, did you? We'll just have a little chat, won't we? Ah, Templeton, pleasant trip? Here we are. First, business class? But that's impossible!
Introducing Transworld One, first-class service, business class fare.
We're challenging shoppers to compare X14 mildew stain remover to Tilex.
Oh, look at that, X14! It changed from almost like black to white. Amazing, very amazing. X14 is something I would definitely buy.
You know, it's amazing how 3 little words can strike fear into the hearts of the fearless. Hey, come on, don't get bummed. Get back to school at Office Depot.
Hey, this place is cool.
Yeah, you'll see more notebooks and pens, more backpacks and binders, more electronics and software, all kinds of stuff at guaranteed low prices. Now, don't you feel better about going back to school?
Yeah, real.
Hey, I was only asking.
Taking care of business.
Hello? Alex, it's Paul. What do you hear from Wall Street on the offshore project?
I don't know.
You were hoping for something fresh, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I've got a proposal.
You mean First Union?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, they know the risks, and their plan for getting the capital protects us if the market moves against us.
I like the sound of that.
No kidding. We're gonna nail this one.
Right.
You can depend on us when you need to be rescued, but AAA is also there when you want to be reacquainted, rocketed, cascaded, paraded, astonished, and completely enchanted. Because AAA members get exclusive Walt Disney World travel benefits, special savings packages, even a free Disney vacation planning video. For information on the packages, free vacation video, or AAA membership, call 1-800-222-8411.
Travel with someone you trust.
AAA.
It's not about saying cheese anymore. It's what doesn't go according to plan that makes the best pictures. Try Fuji Color Quick Snap Plus one-time use cameras, because life won't stand still while you go home and get your camera.
Something happens when you read the Wall Street Journal every business day. You start seeing opportunities where you never saw them before. See for yourself. Subscribe now to the Wall Street Journal. The Journal keeps you right at the heart of what's going on in business. Call now for the Journal and get your free guide to planning your financial future. Facts you need to start planning a secure future right now. Get 10 weeks of the Wall Street Journal for just $38 and get the guide free.
Call now, 800-257-1257. That's 800-257-1257.
Out from behind bars and into the ring, Mike Tyson from where he begins his comeback. Larry King live from Las Vegas, Wednesday night, 9 Eastern on CNN.
The Citadel's first female cadet is spending the day in the infirmary. After drilling, saluting, and learning to follow orders in 100-degree temperatures on Monday, Shannon Faulkner and 4 other cadets at the South Carolina Military Academy were overcome by the heat. A spokesman says that she could remain in the infirmary until tomorrow, which could be the earliest a doctor can examine her. The Air Force is grounding 7 officers involved in last year's shoot-down of 2 U.S. helicopters over Iraq. 26 people died in the incident. And as CNN's John Holloman reports, the victims' relatives had grown increasingly vocal recently in their complaints that no one was held accountable for the tragedy.
More than a year after 2 U.S. Air Force F-15s shot down 2 Army helicopters over Iraq, Air Force Chief of Staff General Ronald Fogelman has spoken to his own troops about the standards he doesn't think were met in that case.
The actions of Air Force personnel that contributed to the accidental death of 26
friendly soldiers, airmen and civilians, do not meet Air Force standards. I have personally issued supplemental performance evaluations for several officers which document failure to meet Air Force standards.
For the 2 F-15 pilots who shot down the choppers, the 3 AWACS radar operators who guided them to the target, and 2 generals who had overall responsibility for the no-fly zone in northern Iraq, their careers have been brought to a halt, and they now have stinging letters of reprimand in their personnel files. But the Pentagon insists the review system mostly worked.
The actions that were taken by commanders were found to be appropriate in both the administrative and the military justice area. The one area that General Fogelman had a concern with was the personnel actions.
Even though the top Air Force lawyer says the administrative process works, he admits field commanders could have grounded the pilots and AWACS operators, as General Fogelman has now done.
They failed to meet Air Force standards that are up here on a given date. Their failures were part of a chain of causation that contributed to the deaths of 26 soldiers, airmen, and civilians.
While today's action does not officially end the careers of the 7 officers, Pentagon officials say it effectively freezes them in place, and that generally leads to retirement. But that may not be enough for the families of the victims.
If they, the Air Force, are the accused, the judge, and the jury, the outcome can never be a just one. Because honor and integrity come from making tough decisions during tough times, not from covering up mistakes, obstructing justice, and withholding information.
Some Air Force officials say they hope this change of direction will reassure Congress and family members of victims who've been charging a cover-up that the Air Force is finally beginning to punish wrongdoers rather than rewarding them. John Holloman, CNN at the Pentagon.
The U.S. Justice Department has agreed to pay more than $3 million to settle claims stemming from a standoff 3 years ago in Ruby Ridge, Idaho. 3 people, including the wife and son of white separatist Randy Weaver, were killed when federal agents tried to end the siege. Under the settlement, each of the Weavers' 3 surviving children will receive $1 million. Randy Weaver himself will receive $100,000. The Justice Department says the government admits no wrongdoing in the case. In economic news, the U.S. dollar, which sank to record lows last spring, continues to rebound. The United States, Germany, and Japan teamed up today to buy U.S. currency, a move that makes German and Japanese goods more affordable to Americans. Today's buying spree lifted the value of the dollar to its highest levels in nearly 6 months. Some of the better-known department stores in the United States may have sold clothing made under conditions of virtual slavery. Whether the stores and their suppliers knew what was going on is now the subject of a federal investigation. CNN's Greg Lamont has that story.
The clothes you're wearing right now could possibly have been made by slave labor. Not slave labor from some other country, but instead in Southern California.
We identified a dozen manufacturers and nearly 20 prominent retailers who have been linked to the Los Angeles garment contractor known as D&R Fashion, also doing business as S&P Fashion and SK Fashion, which is alleged to have been holding workers in slave-like conditions.
On August 2nd, this suburban Los Angeles apartment complex was busted by state labor agents acting on a tip that workers were being held there against their will. The operation resulted in freedom for 70 Thai nationals who were allegedly forced to work as many as 18 hours a day for less than $2 an hour.
Every legitimate garment contractor and manufacturer in this state and the rest of the United States is paying the price not only because of the bad publicity, but how can you compete against somebody who's using slave labor and doesn't pay any taxes? You can't.
The state is now seeking $5 million in unpaid wages for the workers, not only from the manufacturer accused of holding them as slaves, but from any other manufacturer or retailer who knowingly did business with that company. The U.S. Labor Department says some of the nation's top retailers may be selling garments made by the accused manufacturer, including Macy's, Montgomery Ward, Neiman Marcus, and Sears. These companies are said to be fully cooperating with the ongoing investigation. In the meantime, legitimate garment manufacturers say they're happy about this latest bust.
The underground economy that these people were involved with is a terrible plague that's been affecting the garment industry and the apparel production industry in Los Angeles and California for many, many years.
The alleged slaves say they were threatened with rape or death if they tried to escape or if they quit producing. They have since been released by the Immigration and Naturalization Service and are attempting to get temporary work papers to stay in the country. Greg Lamont, CNN, Los Angeles.
As we continue to wait for the OJ Simpson trial to resume, we'll take a break.
Tonight in the Crossfire, could Mark Furman's remarks about Judge Ito's wife cause a mistrial in the Simpson case? Crossfire, tonight, 7:30 Eastern on CNN.
We're first in Bullet. Bullet Federal is now First Federal Savings Bank, and that's good news for you. It means expanded and new services from one of America's strongest and safest financial institutions. It means fast approval and competitive rates on loans for any purpose, and new products like bonus banking. And it means ownership stays right here in Central Kentucky. What you've liked at Bullet will be even better at First Federal Savings Bank. You've got a great bank right here at home.
It's Kart Country. Hold everything. Kart Country still has the first and longest go-kart track with an overpass in Kentucky. But now they offer Thunder Road. Not for the weak at heart. Thunder Road. One of the largest, fastest go-kart tracks in the United States. Thunder Road. Only at Kart Country. Just south of the airport off I-65. Exit 117 Shepherdville, just past Ponderosa.
Go ahead and read. Don King on Larry King Live tonight.
There are promises of peace in the midst of war and threats of continued fighting in the former Yugoslavia. The Croatian army commander warned the Serbs in Bosnia today to stop bombing the Adriatic seaside town of Dubrovnik. He said if they continue, then he has no choice but to retaliate. Hundreds of Bosnian Croats and Muslims are being expelled from their homes in northwestern Bosnia. Bosnian Serbs are pressing ahead with a program to make the area ethnically pure. The refugees were ferried across the river into the Croatian hamlet of Davor today at a rate of 200 an hour. In Sarajevo today, another child suffered the perils of war. The 7-year-old boy was hit by a Serb rifle grenade as he was playing. The U.S. and Russia have competing peace plans for the former Yugoslavia after Croatian attacks altered the balance of power in the region. CNN's Margaret Lowry reports on the peace process.
First of all, the Bosnian and Croatian ambassadors to Britain held a joint news conference in London Tuesday, but behind the show of diplomatic unity, division over the latest American effort to find a negotiated settlement to the conflict in the former Yugoslavia.
The new American plan, if it is American at all, has the fate of all the previous plans. Namely, it has no chance at all.
Details of the plan have not been made public. Reports say it redraws the map originally suggested by the five-nation contact group on Bosnia, among other things giving Bosnian Serbs the Muslim enclave of Gorazde, while giving the Bosnians more territory around Sarajevo and threatening military force against the Serbs if they don't comply. The Bosnian president, Alija Izetbegović, has already ruled out trading Gorazde, though he says some territorial concessions eventually may have to be made.
Bosnian government are not going to accept any kind of new plan involving, you know, that Bosnians are leaving some territories to the Serbians. We all, on the opposite, we claim for restoring the situation with the enclaves of Srebrenica and Žepa.
Croatians, on the other hand, welcome a new initiative, perhaps because it reportedly gives them more land.
Croatian authorities are paying very great attention to the American plan, and I think that the overall reception of the American plan in Croatia is greatly favorable.
It does not play so well in Moscow. As Russian aid convoys headed for the former Yugoslavia Tuesday, a Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman said the peace process needs new momentum, but cautioned that the U.S. threat to use military force is unacceptable. With the Bosnians opposed for different reasons, the new American plan is perhaps not so much a new alternative as simply another one. Margaret Lowry, CNN, London.
Stand by. In the former Soviet Republic, the Chechen rebels, now faced with new Russian threats of renewed war, have agreed to begin turning in at least some of their guns. Russian President Yeltsin's ultimatum came as the deadline for the two sides to strike a deal expired on Monday. The initial peace accord was signed in July. In it, the Chechen separatists said they would surrender their weapons and Moscow would agree to withdraw some of its troops from the breakaway republic. There may be a new weapon against cancer, mother's milk. Lab experiments done in Sweden found an ingredient in human milk that caused lung cancer cells to die, while leaving normal cells unaffected. The findings have been published by the National Academy of Sciences. Financial problems are forcing many of the nation's poison control centers to close down. Those who call seek immediate advice by telephone to treat people who have swallowed or inhaled harmful substances or suffered poisonous bites. More than 2 million calls were made to control centers last year. Federal officials plan to seek funding by Congress by spring. Poison centers currently get their money from state and local governments. Millions of Americans depend on 911 operators to bring them help quickly. Well, now, thanks to high technology, help may be on the way even more quickly. CNN's Ed Garston has that story.
Emergency 911, where is the problem?
Thousands of times each day and night, they handle emergency calls that can be matters of life and death. And no one knows better than the operators who answer the 911 emergency lines that precious minutes or seconds can make the difference.
Dearborn Emergency.
The Dearborn, Michigan Police Department is experimenting with a way to shave those seconds. A system developed by AVL Information makes it possible for an operator to see where every police and fire unit is and which one is closest to the emergency.
We get a coordinate or a location on the earth, bring that into the map display, and then based on that, we can tell where our various vehicles are.
Police cruisers are outfitted with transmitters and an antenna, which sends a constant signal to one of several global positioning satellites.
What this system does is remove all the guesswork as far as where the closest car to the scene of the incident actually is.
By early 1996, another system using GPS will be available to Lincoln Continental owners. We'll say you get stuck and you need some help. Just hit a button.
A person at the Westinghouse Response Center in Dallas immediately answers within 1 minute.
Lincoln Security, how may I assist you?
Through the global positioning satellite system, they can pinpoint the location of the car within 100 feet.
The location of the vehicle is at Dockstader Street and Russell Street.
That information can be passed along to 911 operators, saving seconds.
Okay, car 41159.
Another way to save time is to reduce the steps an operator needs to take. That's what Motorola has done with a system that allows an operator to not only answer the call, but also dispatch help at the same time.
What we're trying to provide is an economy of real estate and also reducing the stress and the efficiency of the dispatcher or the operator.
2120, South Harrison, trying to locate a dog.
And finally, dictaphone is replacing those old giant tape reels that record 911 calls with compact digital audio tapes. The tiny cassettes can hold up to 640 hours of calls. Each call is noted on a computer and can be played back at the touch of a button. Speed and accuracy, the name of the game in the life and death world of 911. Getting faster so you can hear those assuring words.
They're on the way, ma'am. They should be there shortly.
Ed Garston, CNN, Dearborn, Michigan.
As we've been saying, the OJ Simpson trial has been expected to resume any time now. While we continue to wait, let's check in with CNN's Jim Murray in Los Angeles. Jim.
Thank you, Judy. It's been a dramatic day in the Simpson trial. Progress essentially ground to an abrupt halt. Judge Lance Ito recused himself. That means removed himself from the case with respect to two issues. That is the so-called Furman tapes and whether Captain Margaret York, his wife, who is mentioned by Furman on those tapes according to court transcripts, is a material and relevant witness for purposes of rehabilitation. The attorneys have been in Department 100 for the past hour and a half to receive the another judge to hear this case. Let's go now to CNN's Greg Lefebvre, who is outside the criminal courts building in downtown Los Angeles with the latest. Greg?
Jim, a couple of minutes ago, another chapter began in the OJ Simpson saga, and that is that a new judge, Judge John Reed, will be hearing the matter of the Furman tapes and whether or not they are admissible, as you had discussed there a moment ago. What happens now? The lawyers have gone from Judge James Baskew's court down the hall to Judge Reed's court to begin talk about scheduling. The official presiding judge here, Judge Baskew, heard from the two lawyers in this side. The situation is that Johnny Cochran got up and said, essentially, Judge, the Furman tapes mention judges all over Los Angeles County in general, and that was Cochran's view that no judge could view this without some kind of prejudice, and Cochran hinted broadly that this matter really should go to the California Judicial Council. Cochran also said that he will reserve his right to appeal this ruling. Marcia Clark got up and said, Your Honor, the situation is clear and you need to decide. And Judge James Baskew did. He sent this down the hall to Judge John Reed, who at this moment is discussing scheduling, what will happen in the next few days and the next few weeks in this matter. Jim?
Greg, was there any indication that Johnny Cochran was reluctant to have this particular judge hear these issues, or was he just opposed to the idea of anyone other than Judge Ito hearing this case?
He was blanket in his concern about any Los Angeles County judge hearing this matter. He said that in the Furman tapes, judges in general, Los Angeles judges, are mentioned by Furman in a disparaging way, and he said that means that no Los Angeles judge should hear this matter. But Marcia Clark countered by saying that because no judge is mentioned specifically and that there is no specific item or event connected with any particular judge in the Furman matter, that the judges should be able to go ahead and hear it. And Baskew agreed.
Now, Greg, clearly Judge Lanzito mentioned the fact that his wife, Captain Margaret York, the highest-ranking female LAPD officer, was mentioned by name. That, according to the prosecutor and the defense in this case, since Judge Ito hasn't actually heard those tapes. Was there any indication that Margaret York's name, did her name come up at all in these discussions?
Not specifically. There were, in general, references to these two, and of course, in Judge Ito's order, the relevance of Captain York as a witness was mentioned, but the two sides did not raise her specifically.
Greg, one last question. The judge had indicated that he wanted the last witness to be called, Michelle Kessler, to finish her testimony, and then and only when they got to the issue of the tapes would Judge Ito halt the trial. Was there any indication that that could indeed happen?
The buzz in the courtroom today among lawyers on both sides is it appears unlikely that we will get to the rest of Kessler today. Somebody said these things seem to kind of bumble and tumble along, and before you know, it's 5 o'clock. Right now, it's 3:40 local time, and by all indications are the Judge Reed and the lawyers for both sides are still talking about this. If I had to wager something, I would think that Ms. Kessler may wait another day.
Thank you. That's Greg Lefebvre at the Criminal Courts Building in downtown Los Angeles. Let's check in with our legal analyst. Greta Van Susteren joins us from our Washington studios. Greta, any surprises here with the reassignment of another judge to hear these two issues?
Not at all. In fact, Judge Ito sent it to some other judge, as we all know. And of course, once it got there, now it seems that Johnny Cochran's a little bit upset with going there. And that's actually predictable as well. He seems to want it to go to some other area where none of the judges were insulted. But judges have pretty thick skin. And as Marcia Clark pointed out, not one judge was named in particular. So I'm confident that an LA judge can decide this issue.
Roger Cossack, our legal analyst here in Los Angeles, it appears that Johnny Cochran was simply upset that Judge Ito sent this out in the first place.
Well, you know, he wanted Judge Ito to hold on to it, and I think that he felt that Judge Ito is the best person to make the decision. But you know, there's really very little decision for Judge Ito to make. Once you get involved with having your spouse involved in these tapes, you have to remove yourself. He's absolutely right. It is a long history of in American jurisprudence that you have to not only be fair, but give the appearance of fairness. And you cannot have a judge making a decision where his wife is involved. It's just not right.
And we're going to take a break and be back with more right after this.
Hello, folks. William Shallard here for Globe Life Insurance. You know, many of us need additional life insurance, but deciding which policy to buy can be a confusing process. Well, Globe's long life policy is designed to provide the extra coverage many of us need, and it's simple and easy to understand. The long life policy features a level $10,000 benefit that's available from the very first day the policy is issued. It only costs $1 to start a long life policy. $1 covers the premium for the first month. This lets you review the policy. If you're not satisfied, return the policy for a complete refund. And finally, applying for coverage is easy. No physical exams, just answer a few health questions. Globe makes buying life insurance that simple. So call Globe today.
To receive complete information and applications by return mail, call Globe at 1-800-251-6500. Call Globe today.
I demand clean, but I hate cleaning toilets. So I use 2000 Flushes Blue. Keeps it sparkling with every flush for up to 4 months. Honey, there's more to life than cleaning. Why use brushes when there's 2000 flushes?
I was thinking about getting married again.
Bill, Marcia's 10 years older than you.
What difference does that make? Sometimes I wish my family wasn't so connected.
Mom says when you're 50, she'll be 60.
Talk to them, Sam. Mom, what if he was 10 years older than her?
That's different.
She loves him, Mom. That's what matters. The next day, I got a message, but it wasn't for me. Marcia. It said, "Welcome to the family, Marcia. Love, Mom and Dad."
When is a stamp not just a stamp?
When it's the one you've been waiting for.
The Maryland stamp, now at your post office. Or call for our catalog. When is a stamp not just a stamp?
When it brings a nation together.
You won't want to split up our new Civil War stamps, now at your post office. Or call for our catalog.
Tonight in the Crossfire. Explosive remarks from Detective Mark Furman against Judge Ito's wife. Could his transcripts cause a mistrial in the Simpson case? Sununu, Kinsley, Crossfire. Tonight, 7:30 Eastern on CNN.
The matter of the so-called Furman tapes has been assigned to LA County Superior Court Judge John Reed. Earlier today, Judge Lance Ito recused or removed himself from the Simpson case with respect to deciding two issues: the admissibility of those so-called Furman tapes and whether or not Judge Lance Ito's wife, LAPD Captain Margaret York, who is mentioned in those tapes, is a relevant and material witness for the purpose of the prosecution's case to rehabilitate Mark Furman. Let's now listen to a portion of Judge Ito's decision.
In this particular case. In this case, there have been several decisions that this court has had to make that have been difficult decisions to make. And this is an extremely difficult one that I was not looking forward to having to make. Having said that, the canons of judicial ethics and the Code of Civil Procedure do not give to trial court judges the benefit of the doubt. And when a concern is raised regarding a court's ability to be fair and impartial, it is not the actual existence of impartiality or partiality that is the issue, it's the appearance. I would love my wife dearly. And I am wounded by criticism of her. As any spouse would be. I think it is reasonable to assume that that could have some impact. As I mentioned, women in male-dominated professions learn to deal with this, and those who are successful, I think we all observe, are tougher than most. But having said that, the appearance of a reasonable concern that this court could impartially rule on these material issues is there. And I feel I have an obligation then to recuse myself from two issues. One, the scope of the impeachment that is available of Mr. Furman through these tapes, because one might suspect that this court would have a motivation to punish Mr. Furman and thereby make wider the scope of impeachment. Someone might reasonably be concerned about that. One might also be concerned that this court, in trying to express its impartiality, would bend over backwards the other way and restrict it. In either event, there would be concern about this court's ability to act impartially in this matter. I therefore recuse myself from the issue of the tapes themselves, and specifically whether or not Captain York is a material and relevant witness for rehabilitation and or impeachment of Detective Furman, as the case may be. This matter is therefore, this particular issue is therefore transferred forthwith to Department 100 for reassignment.
And the attorneys were in Department 100 before Judge James Basque. Judge Basque told the attorneys there was no evidence that would prevent another Superior Court judge from hearing the matter immediately. It has since been reassigned to Superior Court Judge John Reed. At one point in the hearing, the defense went into a huddle. Judge Basque looked at OJ Simpson and said, quote, "Mr. Simpson, it looks like huddles, doesn't it?" Referencing OJ Simpson's football career, no doubt. Simpson replied, quote, "Yeah, but I don't know the play." Basque then replied, "It might be an audible," another sports reference. Roger Cossack, unusual recounting of events in the Department 100, wouldn't you say?
This is just another in a long line of unusual events today. Judge Basque is a career deputy district attorney who worked in Los Angeles County, is highly respected. He's the supervising judge here in the Superior Court, and that means all of the assignments come to him, and he decides what judge gets the call, and I don't think that he'll be getting a Christmas card from Judge Reed either.
Let's listen now to Johnny Cochran as he made an impassioned plea for Judge Ito not to recuse himself, and he also put on the record various revelations with respect to the so-called Furman tapes.
We have checked these tapes out, and there are at least 30 times when the so-called N-word is used to refer to either suspects, regular citizens, city council people, anyone in disparaging terms. There are at least 17 instances in these tapes in which Furman, Detective Furman, admits or approves of planting, manufacturing evidence, lying, or covering up police misconduct. At least 17 instances. And in one instance, he describes himself as a key role in covering up a situation, Your Honor.
Well, Mr. Cochran, forgive me for interrupting you, but this is sort of the offer of proof that you need to make to the person who will make the materiality call. Well, so I thought you were going to propose another method of evaluating that issue.
Well, I will do that, but I'm saying to you, once you hear this offer of proof, it's back to our additional position I made this morning that there's no reason to send it out. And if you do send it out, then send it out only, here's what we propose. Assume, arguendo, that based upon this, the 30 instances of where the N-word has been used, or at least 17 instances where this officer has talked about lying, covering up, beating people, and that sort of thing. Subsume that that is relevant, okay? Then, under that scenario, let them argue that Margaret York is material, because you're going to say we're going to waste all this time. I mean, in LA County, I can't believe the Board of Supervisors are hearing this. They must be really shocked out of their minds, because how could you then pull a judge off another case, ask them to read this entire transcript for something they will never be able to get in? This is a waste of time. And it's ironic that we're the ones bringing this up, it seems.
Mr. Cochran, here's the problem. The problem is this. They raise the argument, they raise the issue that because the court is now aware, based upon the offers made both by you and by Ms. Clark, that Mr. Furman has made comments disparaging of this court's spouse. Would a reasonable person with those facts suspect that the judge might have difficulty in being fair in evaluating the materiality of impeachment testimony with regards to the person who was alleged to be making these disparaging remarks?
Well, let me answer that. Let me answer that. Well, you know what? When I told you this morning how this man disparaged everyone, went back through the transcripts also. Well, you're not going to be able to send it, it seems to me, necessarily to people in this county. Let me read something for you. Quote, may I, Judge, I'm up to discussing. May I proceed? May I proceed, Your Honor, please? Every judge of the Superior Court and Supreme Court, I don't know what the Supreme Court or the Superior Court says, and I really don't give a blank. That's how he refers to Superior Court judges in this county, and to politicians and everyone. He has something for everybody. So, I mean, it may be your wife, but he has just as little regard for Superior. I suppose that a judge who sits and listens to that on the tapes, and I quoted from the tapes, they're not going to be very pleased with this man either.
The problem is my wife is apparently referred to by name, by rank, and by
she is?
Assignment, contact with this person.
She is, but I think that he also refers to Superior Court judges in this county. He has no respect for anyone. So well, I'm just pointing out to you that it's not going to be easy for you. If you want to send it to a woman, he doesn't like them. You want to send it to a black, he doesn't like them. You want to send it to a Mexican, he doesn't like them. He doesn't like anybody. Doesn't like Jews, doesn't like anyone unless they're white Anglo-Saxon police officers. And that...
Greta Van Susteren in Washington, how problematic is scheduling, do you think?
Oh, I think it's a terrible problem, because once we finish this last witness who's on the witness stand, I don't think the defense can go forward until this issue is resolved, whether or not these statements are going to come in and whether or not Margaret York is going to be called as a witness. So I think we're going to be put in a holding pattern, because I don't think any judge can decide this forthwith. I think it's going to take some time.
Roger, clearly the issue of the sequestered jury is on the minds of the new judge. What, if anything, can they do to speed up the process? This judge clearly has to get up to speed on the Furman issues, and according to the defense, Mark Furman's name is mentioned in excess of 1,800 times in the court transcript so far.
He's just going to have to burn the midnight oil. I hate to sound hokey about this, but that's about what he's going to have to do, and rely upon the lawyers to give him good, informative briefs of where he has to look.
Let's listen now to Marcia Clark as she addressed the court with regard to the issue of Judge Ito recusing himself.
With their insistence on the use of these tapes to put into evidence one of the biggest red herrings that has ever been seen in the course of jurisprudence, they have forced us to litigate an issue that directly involves the spouse of this court in multiple ways. And whether there is actual bias and whether this court will be able to actually set aside its bias is no longer an issue, because the appearance has been created. And so what we are talking about at this juncture is that there is no ability to sever the issue and say, this is it, and we'll take only this issue out and then come back. Because the situation that has been created now is that all rulings with respect to Furman witnesses become suspect in view of what we know to be the case in terms of allegations made by Detective Furman. Certainly it's framed squarely and completely with respect to the tapes and the issue of their admissibility. And then, of course, again, with respect to the admissibility of rebuttal testimony by Captain York. But it spreads out to all the witnesses that would be called concerning Mark Furman. All rulings at that point will be looked at from the point of view, well, we know why he let the witness say that. After all, he knows what Mark Furman said about his wife, or all female officers. That's the situation we're put in now. Very unfortunate.
Roger Cossack, very briefly, could this threaten to derail the entire trial?
No, Jim, I don't think so. I think that this is something that will be worked out. I do not see a mistrial behind this. I think that that they will figure a way around this, and I just think there'll be a delay, but I think it'll go on.
Once again, to bring you up to date, the Simpson court has not yet reconvened. If they do reconvene and there are any significant developments, we will interrupt regular programming and bring it to you. CNN will update you on the latest developments in the Simpson trial on Prime News at 8. If there is more testimony today, CNN will air it in its entirety beginning at 4 a.m. Eastern, 1 Pacific. A reminder, tune in to CNN at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 Pacific for a half-hour special recapping today's significant developments in the Simpson trial. Our live coverage of the trial resumes tomorrow, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. I'm Jim Moray in Los Angeles. Moneyline is coming up next.
It's powerful enough to reduce cooling bills by up to 40%. Strong enough to move 9,500 cubic feet of air per minute. Still, the Hunter ceiling fan is the quietest thing in the room. Hunter, quiet for life.
Let's see what Templeton is up to. What's this? I knew it. Champagne? Lobster? So, you thought you could just slip a first-class ticket by me, did you? We'll just have a little chat, won't we? Ah, Templeton, pleasant trip? Here we are. First, business class? But that's impossible!
Introducing Transworld One, first-class service, business class fare.
Mike Tyson, live from Las Vegas on Larry King Live, Wednesday night, 9 Eastern on CNN.
We're first in Bullet. Bullet Federal is now First Federal Savings Bank, and that's good news for you. It means expanded and new services from one of America's strongest and safest financial institutions. It means fast approval and competitive rates on loans for any purpose, and new products like bonus banking. And it means ownership stays right here in Central Kentucky. What you've liked at Bullet will be even better at First Federal Savings Bank. You've got a great bank right here at home.
It's Kart Country. Hold everything. Kart Country still has the first and longest go-kart track with an overpass in Kentucky. But now they offer Thunder Road. Not for the weak at heart. Thunder Road. One of the largest, fastest go-kart tracks in the United States. Thunder Road. Only at Kart Country. Just south of the airport off I-65. Exit 117 Shepherdville, just past Ponderosa.
Go ahead and read.
Don King on Larry King Live tonight. Live from the world's financial capital, New York City, this is Moneyline with Lou Dobbs.
Good evening. A successful international effort today to bolster the dollar having the opposite effect on Wall Street. Stocks fell on fears the surging dollar would threaten export earnings of multinational companies by making American products more pricey overseas. That and uncertainty about interest rates weighing down on the market. Late afternoon buying paired an early 45-point loss for the blue chips, with the Dow Jones Industrials finishing at 4640.84, a loss on the day of 19 points. The dollar, however, staging solid gains, hitting 6-month highs in late New York trading against both the Japanese yen and the German mark. Up 3 into third yen against the Japanese currency, gaining 4.5 pfennigs against the Deutschmark, and also rising almost 2 cents against the British pound. Behind today's rally, a coordinated dollar buying spree by the Federal Reserve, the central banks of Japan, Germany, and Switzerland. Kitty Pilgrim joins me now and has more on this global show of support for the dollar. Kitty?
Lou, it was like the United States, Germany, and Japan said, let's go shopping. The action took the market by surprise, and in fact, some European markets were closed for a holiday. It's all part of a new dollar strategy that is working surprisingly well.
The dollar buying was heavy in Tokyo, London, and New York. Confirmation of the intent came quickly from Washington.
We intervened with
the Japanese and the monetary authorities in Germany to continue the process of the orderly reversal that we referred to in the April communique.
Since Rubin met with his G7 counterparts in April, the dollar has risen 16.5% against the yen and more than 7% against the Deutschmark. On Wall Street, the intervention is perceived as a distinct shift of tactics.
They have really become quite good at guerrilla warfare. Central banks are just not as potent as they used to be because of the size of the currency markets. They have to pick their spots now when they intervene to be effective.
And the new strategy of buying when the dollar is rising instead of falling is showing results.
They're entering the market in very aggressive fashion, and they're entering in very large amounts. So they have the element of surprise.
And that, say some, is changing market perceptions.
What has changed is that the market is becoming more bullish. If the dollar starts rising, then people will buy US-based assets, and that means capital flows will come to back that movement up. So really, although the fundamentals haven't changed, market perception is really the key here.
Well, as well as the dollar's been doing in gaining back ground, traders say it's important to remember it hasn't even come back to levels that hit last January. Lou?
Kitty, thank you. Well, the dollar also boosted by a surprising drop in Japan's huge trade surplus. The Japanese saying the trade gap in July narrowed to $9.5 billion, and the politically sensitive surplus with the United States down for a second straight month, shrinking to $3.87 billion. In Japan today, it was a time to reflect and to remember. 50 years ago, Japan surrendered to the Allies, ending World War II. And today, Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama offered an official apology for Japan's wartime actions. A dream of Japan's wartime leaders was to establish what they called a greater East Asia political empire, one that stretched from Indonesia to Manchuria, supplying Japan with both raw materials and markets. What has developed instead is an economic powerhouse, with Japan at center stage. Bill Dorman reports from Tokyo.
The view from Tokyo is increasingly Asian. From Nissan factories in Thailand to Matsushita plants in Malaysia, Japanese investment is welcome. That was not always the case. In the 1970s, Southeast Asia was the scene of protests against Japan and Japanese business. Demonstrators feared corporate colonialism. Japan's government says times have changed.
Since that time, the economic interdependence between Japan and the Asian nations has been developing normally.
Today, Japanese industrial methods and companies are at work with an eye on broader Asia. U.S. firms know they are behind.
And they were telling me what a huge advantage the Japanese firms had because of historical links and the massive amount of investment they were making. But more significantly, the U.S. firms were producing for China, the Japanese firms were producing for export.
Tokyo's wartime vision centered on the emperor. The plan was a regional economic powerhouse, with Japan leading a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. 50 years after the end of the war, the focus is no longer on the emperor. No political empire stretches across the Pacific, but an economic sphere of influence definitely exists, with Japan directly at the center. That dependence goes two ways. Asian countries are becoming more important to Japanese companies, both as markets and as production centers with lower labor costs than Japan. One economist says the co-prosperity sphere now exists with two key differences from the original plan: no political domination and no military occupation. Bill Dorman, CNN Business News, Tokyo.
Major U.S. retailers turned in a mixed performance in the second quarter. Walmart, the country's biggest retailer, posted its 98th consecutive quarter of record sales and profits. Earnings up a solid 12%. Home Depot, meanwhile, posting a 19% gain. Dayton Hudson reporting a 43% plunge, blaming weakness in its Mervyn stores. And J.C. Penney posting a 12% decline. Moneyline has learned that Sears is considering the sale of its 50% interest in Prodigy, the online computer service, a unit which has clearly not lived up to the retailer's expectations. Kathleen Behoff reports from Chicago.
Sears has gotten rid of Allstate Insurance, Homart Real Estate, and the Big Book catalog.
It may now be Prodigy's turn to get the boot. Sears tells CNN Business News the retailer will decide whether to sell its half share in Prodigy after the completion of a strategic study at the online service. Prodigy has fewer subscribers than its two best-known rivals, America Online and CompuServe. Analysts say Prodigy also lags in content quality.
Their survival and success at this stage are a long shot. They're facing some formidable competition that I expect, looking at over the next 2 to 3 years, will put them so far in last place as to put them in a difficult position.
Analysts say Prodigy has lost more than $1 billion in 11 years, though the online service is now making money. Sears wants to know how profitable Prodigy can become and how much more investment is needed. IBM owns the other half of Prodigy. Analysts also question IBM's commitment to Prodigy.
IBM has made overtures very recently that the global consumer online services market is something they want to go after. They hired a major person from Ameritech. They're going after that business. However, none of that was attached to Prodigy.
In addition to improving content, Prodigy needs to find some marketing muscle to get the service into consumers' homes. Analysts say a telephone company would make an ideal partner. Sears says the strategic study should be ready before the end of the year. The retailer will then decide if it still wants to be a player on the information superhighway. Kathleen Behoff, CNN Business News, Chicago.
Another online development tonight, AT&T under criticism for not having a clear internet strategy, today unveiled one. The world's biggest long-distance carrier announced plans to make the internet as simple to use as the telephone. Among other things, AT&T wants to make dial-up internet access simpler for businesses and individuals.
Everybody believes it's their responsibility to grow the internet. Everybody believes that there's, a brass ring at the end of being able to provide the entire world with internet service. I don't necessarily believe that that's true, that the whole world actually even wants the internet.
The AT&T announcement was vague as to when the internet service would begin and just what it would cost. Coming up next on Moneyline, central banks all around the world pumping new life into the dollar. What does it mean for the U.S. economy and markets? Joining me now to talk about that and a lot more, well, actually, just a little later, Bob Hormats, Vice Chairman at Goldman Sachs International. Stay with us.
Moneyline is brought to you by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
ADM pioneered sweeteners from corn 20 years ago. Today, corn refining is a $17 billion industry that saves consumers $1.5 billion a year and taxpayers $500 million annually. At ADM, what we do for our country can be counted in billions. Every year, the importance of this land increases because every year there are a lot more mouths to feed, over 95 million more, a figure greater than the population of Mexico. Fortunately, the food ingredients that Archer Daniels Midland makes from America's harvests can help feed people the world over. Food ingredients such as flour, protein, vegetable oils, and corn sweeteners. Making food and feed ingredients to meet our growing nutritional needs. That's why ADM is supermarket to the world.
There's a right way and a wrong way to cut fresh flowers. Cutting a stem in the open air can block moisture from getting to the flower. So always cut your flowers underwater with a sharp knife at an angle. And be sure your flowers come from 1-800-Flowers, because we've developed a 10-step freshness care system that will keep your arrangements fresh for a week, guaranteed. At 1-800-Flowers, we're always on the cutting edge. Just call our name or visit our stores. The dollar today soared with the help of central banks, but the stock market lost ground.
My guest tonight says the bull run on Wall Street may be close to ending. And my guest tonight is Bob Hermance, Vice Chairman of Goldman Sachs International. Bob, good to have you with us.
Good to be back here, Lou.
Really quite a strategy today with the intervention, the aggressive intervention by these central banks with the dollar moving higher. Any surprise there for you?
The big surprise was the Bundesbank. The Bundesbank had been sort of a reluctant player, and Herr Tietmeyer doesn't intervene at the drop of a hat. He obviously had to be convinced that the U.S. and Japan were for real, and that this was important to Germany and to the financial system, and he intervened. That gave the markets a sense of conviction that they needed.
We're used to seeing a level of cooperation, certainly among the central banks. To see this level of coordination with the Bundesbank involved is really striking. Does this signal, do you think, the beginning of the end for any, if you will, implied policy of letting the dollar sink?
Absolutely. I think one reason that the Treasury wanted to do this and wanted this kind of coordination was to eliminate any doubts in the minds of anyone in the market that the U.S. wanted a weak dollar for trade reasons or for any other reasons. Clearly, this Treasury and this Secretary of the Treasury want to be sure the markets understand they want a stronger dollar and that they think it's good for the U.S., particularly good for our financial markets, as it is.
Not so good, perhaps, for some multinationals whose earnings will be adversely affected with a stronger dollar. What other impact can you see as a result of this strengthening dollar in terms of the U.S. economy?
Well, I think you're right. Some American companies, particularly companies that make a lot of money by selling abroad, will suffer in two ways. One, a stronger dollar reduces their competitiveness a little bit. Second, the money they earn in Deutschmarks and yen and other currencies, when translated back into dollars, won't look quite as good on their results at the end of the year. But other than that, I think most people like the idea of a stronger dollar from a financial perspective because it will attract money into the U.S. financial markets and will hold down pressures on interest rates. If the Japanese become convinced that this strong dollar policy is for real, they'll be more confident about buying treasuries and other financial assets in this country.
A key component in nearly every investor's thinking right now is the direction of interest rates. You just suggested that the result here may be less pressure on interest rates. We seem to see little pressure of any kind on interest rates, in point of fact, in terms of inflation or whatever other source you want to look at. Is there any prospect in sight at all for a lowering of interest rates?
I don't think the Fed's going to lower now. I think the Fed sees that this quarter will see growth that's in the relatively 2.5% range, and then perhaps even stronger growth in the next quarter as at the turn of the year. And I think that will mean not lower interest rates, but relatively firm interest rates. And if the economy does strengthen dramatically, then the market's going to give up all hope of low interest rates in the near term.
And that means the end in the near term of a runaway bull market, at least.
Yeah, I don't see a runaway bull market. I don't see interest rates changing a lot. The long rates could go up a little bit if the economy rebounds, but I don't see the Fed moving one way or the other in the next several months.
The overall health, very quickly here, Bob, we have about 30 seconds. I hate to put you in that kind of confine, but the overall health of the U.S. economy, in your judgment, through the rest of the year, as well as its principal trading
I think
partners?
the U.S. economy looks very good. Inflation looks quite moderate. Growth looks like it's going to pick up. The financial markets are going to be boosted by a relatively strong dollar. I think we're in for a very positive period. I don't think profits are going to look quite as good as they have over the last several quarters, in part because of the stronger dollar. But other than that, I think we're going to have an economy on a relatively even keel.
Bob Hermance, Goldman Sachs International. Good to have you with us. Thanks, Bob. Coming up next here on Moneyline, we'll take a closer look at all of the action on Wall Street, the losers and the winners, including one troubled retailer that surged amid all the selling. And this convicted Wall Street con artist is out of prison, and in his words, now a changed man. We will meet him next on Moneyline. Stay with us.
Tonight in the Crossfire, could Mark Furman's remarks about Judge Ito's wife cause a mistrial in the Simpson case? Crossfire, tonight, 7:30 Eastern on CNN.
Go ahead and read what's on the screen.
iMart Family Vision Care.
How about now?
iMart is different from those crowded vision centers. At iMart, you deal directly with the owners, Dr. Terry L. Goodman and Bob Thompson.
That's right. I'm Dr. Goodman.
And I'm Bob Thompson.
Here at iMart, we believe in customer care.
Come in and ask about our special. Buy one, get one free, going on right now.
So visit us at either location.
Last Saturday, my wife Lisa and I went shopping. We're not paying any attention. That's when it hit me. What would happen to our family if Lisa weren't around anymore?
Recently, I've been trying to get Dave and Lisa to review their life insurance.
We then called Kim. She's our nationwide insurance agent.
Now Lisa has the coverage she needs.
Thanks to Kim, I don't worry about what might happen.
For all of your insurance needs in Bullitt County, call Nationwide Agent Jim Marsh.
Financial news to start your business day. Weekdays 6 Eastern on CNN.
Today, over 70% of our sales come from commercial and international customers, adding to our strength in some very dynamic markets. And if who we are surprises you, maybe it's time you changed your perception of Rockwell.
Hello, Gary, Stan. What's new on the aircraft financing?
Good news.
Yeah?
Matter of fact, I just heard from First Union.
Whoa, that was quick.
Yeah, it's a solid proposal, and the lease will let us do things our way.
That's key. When can they close?
They're ready when we are.
Great work. Gary, let's get them on board now. Once this thing gets going, it's going to move pretty fast.
They always do.
Investors focused on the dollar rally, and the reaction decidedly negative because of fears that that will result in a cut of overseas earnings, which hurt stock prices such as Coca-Cola and McDonald's. The Dow Jones Industrial's down more than 40 points before rebounding late in the session. At the close, the Dow had lost 19.02, finishing at 4640.84, giving up just about half of a gain yesterday. And volume today picking up to 331 million shares, and declining issues beating out advancers by a margin of just about 6-5. The composite fell 0.52, the S&P dropped 1.17, the Dow Transports gained 10.78, while the utilities lost 0.27. The NASDAQ composite, 1,012.37, losing 0.07 from yesterday's record high. Volume, heavy trading, 424 million shares. The American Exchange composite edging up 0.58, just a third of a point away from its all-time record. Tonight at 524.52 on volume of almost 24 million shares. Tonight's Moneyline movers, led by Broadway stores, soaring 4 1/4, more than doubling in price. The financially troubled department store chain late yesterday announced it will be acquired by Federated. The price more than $1 billion. Stop and Shop losing $3.25 a share after the New England supermarket chain reported lower same-store sales, saying it will face heavy competition later in the year. Med Partners up $4 1/4. The company buying Mulliken Medical for $360 million in stock. The deal creates the country's largest operator of physician practices. Odwalla sliding $4 after analysts downgraded the maker of fruit and vegetable drinks, saying this quarter's earnings will be disappointing. And Advanced Circuits up $6 a share. The maker of printed circuit boards accepted a $170 million bid from Britain's Johnson Matthey. Among the widely held tonight, Motorola unchanged, recalling 150,000 cellular phones because of a software problem, many of those phones in Israel. Telecommunications up 1/8, reporting consolidated results for the first time. TCI lost $92 million in the quarter, mostly because of heavy costs for new ventures. Boeing lost 75 cents a share, receiving a $190 million order to build a space module for Russia. Procter & Gamble down 50 cents, selling its Bandasol suntan products line to Pfizer. Terms weren't disclosed. PepsiCo down 1/4, signing a marketing agreement with the NCAA, displacing Coca-Cola for the first time in 6 years. The news comes after Pepsi became the official beverage of 2 home stadiums of NFL teams, despite the league's overall agreement with Coke. In West Virginia today, a major development in a lawsuit that could set an important legal precedent in the area of plant closings. A state judge today gave preliminary approval to a $16 million settlement in a class action lawsuit stemming from the closing of a Maytag factory. If that settlement wins final approval, and it appears likely, this would mark the first time workers have sued and won after their factory was closed. The workers in this case sued Maytag Division for breach of contract and fraud, saying the company hid its intentions to move their jobs to a new factory in South Carolina. The $16 million to be split among 700 workers who would receive anywhere from $3,000 to $100,000 each. Well, from Los Angeles tonight, we revisit one of the most notorious financial criminals of the 1980s. His name is Barry Minko. You may remember him as the Wall Street wonder boy who built a small carpet cleaning firm, Z Best, into a $250 million company. You may also remember that Z Best was built on fraud, and that Barry Minko was convicted and sent to prison 7 years ago. He's tonight a free man, and as he tells Moneyline's Casey Wyan, a changed man.
In 1985, 19-year-old Barry Minko drove a new Ferrari and ran his own company. 10 years later, he's fresh out of jail, driving a used Nissan.
Well, I don't miss it at all. It brought out the worst in me. The loneliest moment in life is when you have just experienced that which you thought would deliver you the ultimate, the big house of the Ferrari, and it lets you down. I'm happier now than I ever was at Z-Best because I don't have to look over my shoulder and wonder when I'm going to get caught.
Minko was caught in a massive fraud involving Z-Best, the company he founded at age 16 in his parents' garage. Within 3 years, Z-Best's stock was worth $250 million. The only problem, nearly 90% of the company's revenue was phony.
I take full responsibility for what I did. I can't blame it. No one forced me to do anything.
From the beginning, Minko was the consummate con man.
It started with spraying water instead of Scotchgard on carpets. And it started with a $200 theft of a money order out of a liquor store when I couldn't make payroll at age 16. And the money orders led to inflated insurance claims, which led to credit card fraud, which ultimately led to bank fraud, which ultimately led to securities fraud.
That led to conviction on 57 counts of fraud and a 25-year prison sentence. Minko was released after serving 7.5 years and converting to Christianity. Now he's on a mission, trying to repay $26 million in court-ordered restitution. He's written a book and produced a video series. Proceeds go to victims like Roberta Clancy.
I don't think it's a question of whether or not all of us will see all of the money back. I think the important thing is that any of it at all is coming back. I think that's a remarkable thing.
Perhaps more remarkable, Minko is speaking to law enforcement groups, bankers, and accountants, telling them how to catch white-collar criminals like himself.
Fraud is the skin of the truth stuffed with a lie.
His speeches are equal parts lecture, sermon, and stand-up comedy.
He stole from everybody he could, but compared to his brother John, he's a saint.
And what about victims who say the new Barry Minko is just another scam?
My lifestyle will prove my authenticity and my actions, and I'm trying to please God. I could care less about pleasing anybody else.
Minko says he has more business opportunities now than ever, but is resisting that temptation and wants to become a full-time preacher.
God bless you and thank you.
Casey Wyan, CNN Business News, Los Angeles.
Interscope, the record company featuring gangster rap artists, is now butting heads with Time Warner, which owns half the company. Interscope is suing black activist Dolores Tucker, who has criticized gangster rap as violent and abusive to women. It accuses her of trying to destroy the record label in order to create her own distribution company for her own personal and financial gain. Time Warner is also named in that lawsuit. Time Warner spokesman late today told Moneyline that the company hasn't seen the lawsuit but believes the suit is not a sensible way to deal with the gangster rap controversy. Well, next here on Moneyline, a story of slave labor in California. And Myron Candell will be here with his thoughts next. Stay with us.
When learning something new, you often give control to someone else. It's the same with investing. But soon, with the right kind of help, you're ready to take charge. You're ready for Charles Schwab.
The whole idea behind Schwab is to help investors help themselves.
We can help you conveniently manage your investments in a Schwab One account, complete with checking, a Visa debit card, and ATM access. Plus, at Schwab, you'll save on commissions, too.
We're Charles Schwab, and we invite you to visit any one of our local offices.
One novel, 250 passengers, one killer virus. Flight 66 is now a hot zone. Pandora's Clock, the hottest thriller of the year. Pandora's Clock. There is no antidote for terror.
Today, over 70% of our sales come from commercial and international customers, adding to our leadership in some very dynamic markets. If who we are surprises you, maybe it's time you changed your perception of Rockwell.
In California today, state officials sent subpoenas to 16 clothing manufacturers as authorities widened their investigation of sweatshops where immigrants were allegedly held in virtual slavery. Those subpoenas stem from a raid 2 weeks ago, a raid of a building just east of Los Angeles. Today, the Labor Department said clothing made in those sweatshops may have found its way to some of the nation's top retailers, including Dayton Hudson, Macy's, and Neiman Marcus. Well, Myron Candell is here now and has a few thoughts. Myron?
Well, Lou, I think these retailers, these reputable companies, can no longer plead ignorance. They have to find out and know where the materials they're selling in their stores are coming from. And I, for one, do not want to wear a shirt or any other garment that's produced by slave labor or forced labor, and I'm willing to pay more for that position.
And I think top retailers, you're likely to.
Yes, well, that's okay, but I want to make sure that they live up to their responsibilities.
A difficult responsibility to enforce, and again, we go back to basic law enforcement. It begins with them, and the country is not really insisting, in many cases, on that enforcement.
I think we could have a consumer backlash, Lou. This case sort of brings it to public attention, and we may have consumers insisting that retailers know where their garments are coming from.
Okay, Myron, thank you. Well, that is Moneyline for this evening, and we thank you for being with us. Good night from New York.
Lou, the issue of Detective Mark Furman's comments to a fiction writer has the OJ Simpson trial in turmoil. Did the former Los Angeles police officer's use of racial epithets in that conversation mean that he perjured himself in his trial testimony? And even more technically explosive as an issue, did Furman's disparaging remarks about Judge Ito's wife set the stage for a possible mistrial? Because of those remarks, the judge has partially recused himself. A bad case of foot and mouth disease? Next in the Crossfire.
Guilty. Not guilty. Weekdays this fall, the burden of proof rests on CNN.
We're first in Bullet. Bullet Federal is now First Federal Savings Bank, and that's good news for you. It means expanded and new services from one of America's strongest and safest financial institutions. It means fast approval and competitive rates on loans for any purpose, and new products like bonus banking. And it means ownership stays right here in Central Kentucky. What you've liked at Bullet will be even better at First Federal Savings Bank. You've got a great bank right here at home.
It's Kart Country. Hold everything. Kart Country still has the first and longest go-kart track with an overpass in Kentucky. But now they offer Thunder Road. Not for the weak at heart. Thunder Road. One of the largest, fastest go-kart tracks in the United States. Thunder Road. Only at Kart Country. Just south of the airport off I-65. Exit 117 Shepherdville, just past Ponderosa.
Go ahead and read.
Financial news to start your business day. Weekdays 6 Eastern on CNN.
I will love my wife dearly. I am wounded by criticism of her.
Live from Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, John Sununu. Tonight, conflict of interest. In the Crossfire, two criminal defense attorneys. In Los Angeles, Barry Tarlow. And in Miami, Roy Black.
Good evening, welcome to Crossfire. It was another wild day at the OJ Simpson trial. Before we get to Crossfire's Black and Tarlow, though, let's go to Jim Murray in Los Angeles to fill us in on the details. Jim?
Thank you, Michael. A different judge, John Reed, will have to review pages and pages of testimony from the OJ Simpson case regarding LAPD Detective Mark Furman. This afternoon, John Reed said he will listen to tapes and read the transcripts regarding the tapes. He wants attorneys for both sides in his courtroom Friday morning ready to argue the admissibility of those tapes and the materiality of a witness, Margaret York, that is Judge Lancito's wife. Today, Judge Lancito removed himself from two issues in the case: whether the controversial tapes of screenwriters' interviews with Furman could be heard by the jury, and whether Judge Ito's wife could be called as a material witness. Johnny Cochran had argued the matter might be best decided by a judicial council, but the supervising judge decided on Judge Reed. Ito's wife, Captain Margaret York, heads up the LAPD's Internal Affairs Department. She allegedly was harshly criticized by Mark Furman in the taped interviews with a screenwriting professor. Judge Ito said no matter what, the appearance of impropriety is enough to make him pass the issues on to another court.
In this case, there have been several decisions that this court has had to make that have been difficult decisions to make. And this is an extremely difficult one that I was not looking forward to having to make. Having said that, the canons of judicial ethics and the Code of Civil Procedure do not give to trial court judges the benefit of the doubt. And when a concern is raised regarding a court's ability to be fair and impartial, it is not the actual existence of impartiality or partiality that is the issue, it's the appearance. I would love my wife dearly. And I am wounded by criticism of her. As any spouse would be. And I think it is reasonable to assume that that could have some impact.
The defense wants to use the tapes to impeach LAPD Detective Mark Furman and help advance its theory that the detective is part of a conspiracy to frame OJ Simpson. Prosecutor Marcia Clark says that means Judge Ito's wife could be called in the rebuttal case as a rehabilitation witness. And once again, the attorneys for both sides are expected to be in Judge John Reed's courtroom on Friday morning to argue this matter. Now to John Sununu.
Thanks very much, Jim. Roy Black, how can anyone not allow tapes in that could determine whether or not the key witness in a trial perjured himself or not?
John, I think this issue is very easy. These tapes prove racial bias on the part of Mark Furman. I think that any judge is going to allow them into evidence, and to even think of excluding these from evidence would be a serious miscarriage of justice.
Does anyone have any idea how in 1994, in the midst of all the publicity that this was going to go to trial, that anyone could so stupidly put words like that onto tape?
Well, this man's been doing it for 10 years. And the interesting thing about people who are bigoted and racist is many times they're not very intelligent. And I think that Detective Furman, if it's true what's on these tapes, now we haven't listened to the tapes, but assuming that it's true, over a 10-year period of time, this man has made outrageous, racist remarks about people, talked about setting people up because of their race. Nothing could be more outrageous than that. And on top of that, he's stupid because he didn't tell his own lawyer and didn't tell the prosecutors about this problem.
When it comes to the issue of context, though, it is going to be just his word against hers. Is that not correct?
Well, it's his voice on the tape. What more do you want? I mean, Judge Ito already ruled that they could bring in 2 witnesses who would testify about Furman using racial slurs. Now you have a tape with his own voice on it using him. I mean, there could be no better evidence than that. That's coming in.
Barry, Tarla, we've already had you on the issue of the admissibility. I want to get you on something which you have insider knowledge of, I understand. What's on these tapes about Judge Ito's wife, Margaret York?
Well, Furman is a hater. He's a misogynist, he's a hater if you believe what's on these tapes, and he quite frankly has a bad word to say about almost everybody, whether you're Jewish as Bob Shapiro is, or black or Mexican, or about Judge Ito's wife. But Roy has not had the pleasure of appearing before our Judge Reed when he is so confident that these tapes will be admissible. The tapes would have been admitted before Judge Ito, but it is a totally different question before Judge Reed. That's why Johnny Cochran is going to the Court of Appeals, and Marsha Clark may have snatched victory from the jaws of defeat by getting out of Judge Ito's court.
I'll bite. Tell us about Judge Reed.
Well, Judge Reed is known in the courthouse as the great denier. The legal establishment sends things to former District Attorney Judge Reed when they want the motion denied. And his favorite words are, "That will be denied, counsel." Therefore, if there is any judge in this courthouse who will limit the defense case, who will cut out part of those tapes, it is Judge Reed. I agree with Roy, though, that any fair judge attempting to get to the truth will let these in evidence.
Well, who decides what? What is the procedure? Who decides what judge gets something like this?
Well, now, interestingly, this is some inside baseball, so to speak.
That's okay.
But there was some real manipulation here. This matter should have gone to Judge Curtis Rapay, a former assistant U.S. attorney, bright, capable judge who heard the previous part of the case about the disqualification of Judge Ito and about his wife's involvement in the case. That's where it should have gone. Instead, it was sent, and I think directed by the forces within the court system who want to help the district attorney get a conviction in this case, to Judge Reed, who is literally the most undesirable judge for the defense in this courthouse. And Johnny Cochran was saying he was going to the Court of Appeals on this. That, of course, is going to do him little good.
Barry, I take it you've decided you're never going to plead before this judge again.
Well, unfortunately, you can call a judge all the names you want, and they don't have to disqualify themselves. As I say, this is a terrible situation for the defense. I believe they literally had the case, if not won. They could not have lost the case if these offensive and troubling tapes were admitted into evidence.
You now think O.J. will walk the minute those tapes, in essence, as a result of those tapes coming in?
I find those tapes to be so offensive, the racism to be so strong, the talk of lying and perjuring yourself in court to be so clear, this lying to help your brother officers cover up, to be all over these tapes, that Sir O.J. could never be convicted if these tapes were played.
Do you agree with that, Roy? Do you agree with that these tapes are, in essence, end the case?
Not logically, but perhaps emotionally. Logically, I think the prosecution's going to distance themselves from Furman. They're going to say, okay, he's a racist, he set up people in the past, he's a horrible person, but look, we have a lot of other evidence in the case. What did he get? He got the glove. Sure, he saw a spot of blood on the Bronco. He did a couple of other things with the shovel and the plastic sheet. But ladies and gentlemen, let's segregate out of the case the glove and Furman and decide it on everything else. Now, I don't know if that's going to win the day, but that's what they're going to have to do.
But did Judge Ito make the right ruling today, though? Did he really have any choice but to recuse himself on these, at least on these particular issues?
Well, interestingly, he was manipulated, I think, by Marsha Clark into this. And in fact, it was some good lawyering by her. It was clear that he was going to let those tapes into evidence.
Yes, but Barry, forget strategy for a minute. On the merits of the issue, was Judge Ito right or wrong to recuse himself when it turns out that his wife is attacked in these tapes?
Well, but that's... just because she's in the tapes, he was wrong to recuse himself. Marsha Clark is never going to call Judge Ito's wife in the trial. That's just a gambit to force him to recuse himself on these issues.
Well, Roy, I got to disagree with Barry on this one.
Go ahead, Roy, please.
All right, I've got to disagree with Barry on this one. I also think Judge Ito is wrong, but for a different reason. I think he should have disqualified himself from the entire case. I mean, this is a position of being partially pregnant. Either you have an appearance of impropriety or you don't. When you have a family member, his wife, the person he loves more than anyone in the world, being called all kinds of names by the star witness, and she may have to be called as a rebuttal witness, I don't think there's any way you can remain on the case.
So you mean he should have declared himself out for the whole rest of the case, or should have declared a mistrial and made him start again on some other judge?
No, I think he should have disqualified himself. They should have brought in another judge, because any ruling he makes from now on is open to criticism
But
because he's worried about his wife.
Only from now on, though. They wouldn't have to go start at the beginning again.
Well, no, they could start over, not start over. They could continue with another judge, but I think Judge Ito has to be gone.
Barry Tarlow, let me ask you this. Should the defense, if they get these tapes in, wrap up the case, or will they continue to try and snatch defeat from the jaws of victory?
Well, you know, they've been doing better lately, but these tapes are powerful evidence, and as far as I'm concerned, before this jury, in this case, at this time, the case is all over for the prosecution. That's not to say that that the prosecution is going to lose or he'll get acquitted, but they will never convict him if these tapes are played, so I think they should wrap it up if they get the tapes in, but you have Judge Reed, that is the great denier, ruling on these tapes.
We'll be back in a minute, and when we do, we'll ask whether we'll get a chance to hear Mr. Furman testify once again.
We want justice. We want it now. It's our client who's been in custody since June 17, and he's maintained his innocence from that day. And now we can establish that innocence through their lying witness.
They are just going all out to smear Mark Furman in the very cynical and shrewd effort to pull this jury away from the evidence, to manipulate them, to play them like fiddles, and to say, ignore the evidence.
Crossfire is brought to you by Office Depot, taking care of business with guaranteed low prices on thousands of brand-named office supplies.
You know, it's amazing how 3 little words can strike fear into the hearts of the fearless. Hey, come on, don't get bummed. Get back to school at Office Depot.
Hey, this place is cool.
Yeah, you'll see more notebooks and pens, more backpacks and binders, more electronics and software, all kinds of stuff at guaranteed low prices. Now, don't you feel better about going back to school?
Yeah, real.
Hey, I was only asking.
Taking care of business.
What would Holiday Inn be like if families could still have all kinds of fun, but for less money? Actually, it would be just like Ramada. Come to Ramada to play the Star Trek Generations trivia game. You could win a trip to one of Paramount's Star Trek sets. Plus, you'll get a great room rate and collectible when you beam aboard. So rent the video and come to Ramada.
It's the summer's hottest event. Mitsubishi's Summer of Thunder may be your last chance for the best savings ever on a Galant S. Lease for just $0 down and $249 a month for 36 months. And only Mitsubishi adds $500 cash back to this offer on a Galant S with automatic transmission, air conditioning, power windows and door locks, and more. $0 down and $500 cash back during the Summer of Thunder. From Mitsubishi, the new thinking in automobiles.
Nature makes flowers beautiful. At 1-800-FLOWERS, we've developed a way to make them last. Our florists use a special 10-step freshness care system, a process that increases water absorption by the flowers and provides the necessary nutrients. That's why at 1-800-FLOWERS, we can guarantee your arrangements will stay fresh for a week. In our business, when people tell us we're fresh, we say thank you. Just call our name or visit our stores.
Hello, I'm Lyndon Souls at CNN Center. Tonight on Prime News, tight security in Oklahoma City for today's arraignments of suspects charged in the April terrorist bombing. 2 pleas, both not guilty. We'll have full details at the top of the hour. Also, disaster preparations on the U.S. East Coast as Hurricane Felix nears. Bobby Batista and I will have those stories and more at the top of the hour. We invite you to join us. Crossfire returns in a moment.
Here's my other brokerage account statement like you suggested.
With your trading history, you could save thousands with the Oldie Smart Trade commissionless trading account.
Will I receive research and investment ideas with Smart Trade?
Absolutely. Oldie has original research and a complete line of investments to help you make money. But what makes Oldie unique is that we offer all this and commissionless stock trading, too.
Is it easy to transfer my account?
Sure is. Consider it done.
Oldie Smart Trade, full-service commissionless trading. Call 1-800-USA-OLDIE.
A sparkling ship on crystal waters is coming.
Absolutely gorgeous. It was so much fun.
The perfect lobster is coming.
Our readers, they would do anything for us, any time.
Perfection is coming.
It's like a gift from the captain.
Memories are coming. 7 days in Royal Caribbean's Caribbean are coming. You've got some Royal Caribbean coming.
There's a right way and a wrong way to cut fresh flowers. Cutting a stem in the open air can block moisture from getting to the flower. So always cut your flowers underwater with a sharp knife at an angle. And be sure your flowers come from 1-800-Flowers, because we've developed a 10-step freshness care system that will keep your arrangements fresh for a week, guaranteed. At 1-800-Flowers, we're always on the cutting edge. Just call our name or visit our stores.
Sunday, we're locking them up and throwing away the keys, and still our fear of crime grows, spending untold millions to keep them away from us. It's a high price for our maximum insecurity. CNN presents Sunday, 9 Eastern.
Welcome back to Crossfire. Will the Furman tapes mean acquittal for OJ Simpson? The Furman testimony on the tapes has the trial watchers buzzing, and here buzzing with us are Crossfire's outstanding pair of legal analysts, Barry Tarlow and Roy Black.
But first, we're going out to Jim Murray in Los Angeles with new developments in the case. Jim?
Michael, indeed, Marcia Clark just moments ago in open court in Judge Lance Ito's courtroom indicated she may be seeking to ask Judge Lance Ito to remove himself from the case. Let's go into the courtroom. The judge is now addressing the jury.
So if you have a good supply of books, bring a couple of extra, what do they call it, a yarn? Skeins. Bring a couple of extra skeins with you. Bring your crossword puzzles. We may or may not be able to proceed tomorrow morning. But I just want you to know that I know that you're up there waiting for us, and I'm aware that you're back there waiting. And it causes me great anxiety every day because I know you're there and you're waiting for us to do something. And I've alerted the sheriffs that there's a possibility we may not use you tomorrow to make arrangements to take you to Target to go shopping on an extra day or something, but to be available to do that. And I apologize to you profusely. At the end of the trial, as I indicated to you, we'll have some of the news coverage available to you so you can go back and refresh your recollections as to just what it was that occurred back on August the 15th that caused this delay. I apologize for not being able to give you a better explanation, but please trust me that it is something that's important. All right, I'm going to release you then for the evening. Remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Form any opinions about the case.
Judge Lance Ito has
allow me to communicate with you. Don't conduct any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you.
For the day, because they were anticipating to hear from Michelle Kessler, the head of the LAPD Crime Lab. He said that there is an important decision involving his personal participation in the trial. He suggested that they get a skein of yarn if they are knitting and get a supply of books because it will clearly take some time. He did not go into any more detail, except he did say that after the trial they should look up in the news reports which they are going to be provided and look and see what happened on August 15th to prompt this. That's the latest for now. Once again, Marcia Clark may be seeking the complete recusal or removal of Judge Lance Ito from this case. The judge has instructed attorneys for both sides to be in his courtroom 9 a.m. Pacific tomorrow to argue the matter. That's the latest from Los Angeles. I'm Jim Moray. Michael Kinsley, back to you.
Thanks, Jim. Well, Barry, Marcia Clark is taking Roy Black's advice and asking for Judge Ito to recuse himself. Is that a good idea strategically or on the merits?
Yes, it is.
Explain why, please.
It is if she wants to keep that tape out. Marcia Clark is a smart lawyer. She recognizes that it's all over for the prosecution if that tape comes in. Because of Judge Ito's earlier rulings about impeaching Furman, he's going to let portions of those tapes in, and it's going to gut the prosecution's case, as well it should. If Mark Furman came into that court, raised his hand to tell the truth, perjured himself, the jury should know that. And one more thing about these tapes. This is a wake-up call for the American public. I go on a show like this and talk about rogue cops or perjury or manipulating evidence, and you get a bunch of haters that call you and say that this doesn't happen. People don't realize what takes place with rogue cops. And when the public hears this tape, it will be chilling, and it paints a sad picture of our Los Angeles Police Department.
Roy Black, this all started when Marcia Clark, very cleverly, I guess, pointed out to Judge Ito that the tapes included information about his wife. Is this a whole sequence of events that the prosecution laid out in anticipation of the process here, or are they winging it as they go along?
You know, John, I have to disagree with Barry on this. You know, it's easy to say that this is a tactic by Marcia Clark or the prosecution because they're losing the case, and one could interpret it that way. But I think a better way to interpret this is that lawyers have a duty to the courts to see that justice is done. Let's put aside our roles as prosecutors and defense lawyers for a minute. To me, it's more important that the system of justice look like it's impartial and that it's fair. I think for fairness' sake, Judge Ito has to step aside because his wife is now embroiled in the case. And I don't think that any judge can continue to sit on a case when the person he loves the most in the world is being attacked by the star witness for one side or the other.
Well, Roy, can prosecution try to salvage this?
Well, you know, it's easy to look at this as a tactic, but I tend to think that Marcia Clark is speaking from a position of integrity here. And I like to look at it as a matter of integrity, and it's more important here that the courts look like they're doing justice than there is in winning any particular case.
Barry, shouldn't
well,
go ahead.
I just disagree for once with Roy completely. First of all, I do agree that Judge Ito should step aside. He has been put in a situation where he shouldn't be trying this case, and of course maybe he never should have been selected from the beginning because of his wife's role in the case. But I think Roy is far too sophisticated a lawyer to truly believe that in a case like this, that this isn't win at all costs, that the winning is all that matters to Gil Garcetti and the prosecution team in this case.
Well,
they are not interested in doing justice.
Can prosecution try and salvage this by withdrawing, if you will, Mr. Furman's testimony from the record and not having to go through the agony of trying to define whether he told the truth or not?
No, their tactic was to try to get the defense to stipulate that Furman had used the N-word, and they were hoping that would sort of solve the problem. But of course, the defense never bid on that, and the defense is never going to agree to anything less than playing 5 or 6 hours of these tapes to this jury. And I'll tell you this, you asked this question to Barry before, I think they should forget the rest of the case, put these tapes on, let the jury hear it, don't call Furman, and rest. And that's the end.
All right, we got to rest. Thanks a lot, Roy. Thank you, Barry. We'll have you guys back, I'm sure. John and I will be back even sooner in just a couple of minutes.
What's happening? The world of teenage fashion is hard to keep up with.
What's happening? Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
What's happening today might not be happening tomorrow.
What's happening?
And what's happening here might not be happening there.
What's happening? どうしてる?
So how do companies like Nike, Benetton, or Lee Jeans keep up with what's happening with kids all over the world? Very simple. These companies rely on GE Information Services, an unparalleled electronic commerce service backed by a worldwide GE support staff. If tastes change in LA, GE lets Lee Jeans know as it happens. If a design takes off in New York, Nike can alert Tokyo instantly. In Paris, if red's out, blue's in. Benetton knows immediately. With GE's worldwide information network, these companies, as well as 25,000 other companies around the world, can be sure their customers always get what they want, when they want it. Because in the global marketplace, the only way to stay on top is to always know what's happening.
Let me guess. One side of you craves easy chair comfort, while the other side itches for performance, right? Well, meet Buick Regal with its famous 3800 V6 engine and Grand Touring suspension. Add to that an all-new interior with body-sensitive seats. And finally, there's a car for the two of you. Buick Regal.
Out from behind bars and into the ring, Mike Tyson from where he begins his comeback. Larry King live from Las Vegas, Wednesday night, 9 Eastern on CNN.
John, you know, in retrospect, I'm a bit mystified about how Judge Ito got this case in the first place. We didn't know about the tapes, of course, but we did know that his wife was Mark Furman's boss, and she's in charge of the division that investigates police misbehavior, which you knew was going to be an issue in the trial. This whole thing, this crisis looked sort of inevitable in hindsight.
In hindsight, I was astounded when I first heard that. I'm amazed, Mike, at the ebb and flow of emotions on this trial. A couple of weeks ago, everyone was sure that O.J. was going to be convicted. I guess now, all of a sudden, all the experts are saying with this explosive new evidence, he's going to come off innocent. It just swings back and forth. I guess we just got to tune in till next week.
Now, are you saying that you think he's innocent because of this?
No, I don't think he's innocent. I think he may not be found guilty, though.
It's a subtle distinction we'll all ponder. From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. Good night for Crossfire.
And from the right, I'm John Sununu. Join us again tomorrow night for another edition of Crossfire.
Meanwhile, Prime News is next on CNN, and here's Bobby Batista to fill us in on what's coming up. Bobby?
Mike, thanks. Here's a look at what's just ahead. Felix roars and the East Coast quakes. A big settlement for a man whose wife and son were shot by the government. And a moving tribute to a baseball legend. Those stories and the latest on the Simpson case just ahead on Prime News.
Closed captioning was provided by Bell Atlantic, the heart of communication.
Guilty. Not guilty. Weekdays this fall, the burden of proof rests on CNN.
Go ahead and read what's on the screen.
iMart Family Vision Care.
How about now?
iMart is different from those crowded vision centers. At iMart, you deal directly with the owners, Dr. Terry L. Goodman and Bob Thompson.
That's right. I'm Dr. Goodman.
And I'm Bob Thompson.
Here at iMart, we believe in customer care. Come in and ask about our special. Buy one, get one free. Going on right now.
So visit us at either location.
Last Saturday, my wife Lisa and I went shopping. You know, we're not paying any attention. That's when it hit me. What would happen to our family if Lisa weren't around anymore?
Recently, I've been trying to get Dave and Lisa to review their life insurance.
We then called Kim. She's our nationwide insurance agent.
Now Lisa has the coverage she needs.
Thanks to Kim, I don't worry about what might happen.
For all of your insurance needs in Bullitt County, call Nationwide Agent Jim Marsh.
This is CNN.
This is a blockbuster. This is a bombshell.
But this is a red herring that has really skewed this entire trial. And it's the defense making.
This is perhaps the biggest thing that's happened in any case in this country in this decade.
For those in the courtroom, an impassioned and agonizing debate.
How the words of this witness stopped the O.J. Simpson trial in its tracks. Good evening from CNN Center. I'm Bobby Batista.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Lyndon Souls. Also ahead on Prime News, Felix takes aim at the eastern seaboard, but where will it come ashore? More on that coming up, but first, perhaps the most dramatic day in the Simpson courtroom, a day that began with the mention of the word mistrial. We're going to a live press conference outside the Superior Court in Los Angeles. And you can see the defense team gathered at the microphone. Robert Shapiro will be the first to speak.
In a case where the unusual has become expected, what we saw today was unprecedented. We saw today the epitome of arrogance from the district attorney's office. Judge Ito has sat and toiled long and hard since September of 1994 to keep this jury together, to keep this case on track, and to get what we want and what the system of justice demands, and that is a verdict from this jury. Today, in something in my 25 years of experience that has never occurred before, after 6 weeks of our testimony and 6 months of theirs, when Judge Ito has apparently caused them to feel that essential material should be heard by this jury, they have decided that Judge Ito should no longer sit on this case. This unprecedented action and anticipated action on the part of the district attorney's office causes us at this crucial juncture in our case a tremendous amount of concern. We want this case and all relevant facts to be before this jury. We want a verdict in this case. We do not want a mistrial. It's clear that the district attorney feels something other than that. They feel that not only should they be in a position to prosecute this case, but they should also be in a position to judge this case. We will support Judge Ito completely. We are filing briefs. We will work all night tonight and do everything we can to ensure that this fine judge and hardworking man, who we not always agree with, who many times, as all of you know, has ruled against us, but who has done one thing, and that is taken this case to a point where we are close to finishing and hopefully get a verdict. To try to remove him at this point in time is something we will do everything within our power to fight against and to protect the independence and integrity of the judicial system in California.
I'd like to address one issue. I've been practicing law for 20 years. I've been a law professor for 18 years. I teach legal ethics, among other things. I find quite extraordinary the fact that when these tapes first emerged, Ms. Clark took the position in Judge Ito's chambers that she was opposed to the admissibility of these tapes before she even heard them. And the course of conduct that she has followed since then has been right on target. She got up there today and said that Mr. Furman had used the N-word at least 13 times, we count 37, in the relevant periods. That's false testimony under oath. She was willing to stipulate it. It's perjury. This man committed perjury on the witness stand. And these tapes, as we've indicated in court, show a practice on the part of this officer and others to willingly manufacture evidence, cover up crimes by themselves, and to frame people. That's what these tapes show. They have an obligation as officers of the court to bring to the attention of the court this perjury, to investigate this man, to indict him if need be. And it certainly looks from our reading of it that that's what's required. It is extraordinary to say that the defense brought this up. They put this witness on the stand. They brought out his testimony. They vouched for him. And now they say it's our fault that we find tapes that show he's a perjurer. This is classic. When a principal witness in the case who is implicated in manufacturing evidence is all of a sudden caught in perjury, which the district attorney was willing to stipulate, now they are trying every trick in the book to get a mistrial by any means necessary. And that's wrong. And you have to ask yourself this question. Why weren't they investigating all of this? Why weren't they concerned when these tapes emerged? What is the reaction here? It's our fault for playing the perjury card, for bringing to the attention of the court and everyone else that this man has committed perjury on significant issues in the case that relate not just to the glove, but relate to the evidence in the Bronco, that relate to everything. What about these other officers? If he has said these things and done these things as is indicated in these tapes, what about everybody else? How could this have remained quiet for so long unless a lot of people wanted it to stay that way? These are serious questions and serious issues, and it is extraordinary from an ethical point of view that they can come into this court and say, it's our fault for pointing out he's a perjurer. This is ridiculous.
Just to wrap it up, today they came for Judge Ito. Yesterday, Judge Ito had the audacity, I guess they think, to dress Marsha down for being totally irrelevant in her examination of Dr. Reeders. And you saw the result today. They made this judgment, and they didn't have the courage to tell Judge Ito. When he sent that case out this morning, or for this afternoon, he thought he was sending it out for the limited purpose of having the issue of materiality of those tapes and his wife's, whether his wife's name would be used in the course of this trial. When they get up there, they tell the other judges, oh no, we want Judge Ito gone forever. Now, can you imagine the arrogance of what they're trying to send to everybody in this case? And it's part and parcel of their win at any cost. Today, the wheels came off the wagon of their case, and all of America can see it. For Marsha Clark to stand up and say the fact that the defense brought this out, when this whole thing is a search for truth and credibility, and if a witness doesn't tell the truth in a case, it's their obligation to do that. We're the ones who brought it up. And for them to claim we brought it up is just outrageous, and nobody's going to fall for that. She talks about red herrings. The red herring is her contention that this isn't a key witness. They want to bury him. They don't know what they're doing up there. And you can bet your bottom dollar now they're meeting, scrambling around, trying to figure out what to do. And caught in this crossfire of their knowledge that they're losing this case is a decent man upstairs who they didn't have the courage or the guts to tell they were trying to kick off this case. And now he knows that. You heard him ask plaintively, do you really want to do that under the circumstances? And we're going to resist that tomorrow. I think it's very, very important that you all understand we're not playing any race card or whatever here. We're playing a perjury card. When Marsha Clark said, we'll stipulate, he used the N-word. Well, it's more than that. He used the N-word more than 30 times. It's the 17 times in those tapes that he talked about framing people or setting up people. Willingness to fabricate is also an issue. You're going to stipulate to that? And finally, all the other things he didn't tell the truth about. And then the coup de grace is, we'll agree to stipulate it if they'll indict him for perjury. You think they're ever going to do that? Yes. We will agree to stipulate that he used this word if they indict him for perjury, just like any other citizen who did this is caught with. That's why they will not do it, because they understand they have been caught and they don't know what to do. We're not letting up the heat off them 1 minute because we have an innocent man and it's unfair. He has to go to 3 courts within an hour today because of their machinations. And our jury's sitting there not knowing why they're going through this. And the juries were visibly upset today. They're not happy being sequestered like this and not knowing. And if the prosecution has its way, this case will not get back to this jury probably for another week or so. And that's outrageous, all because they sit up and make these decisions because things aren't going their way. And the sad part about it, all this stuff about Judge Ito's wife, Marsha Clark is the one who went and told Judge Ito this. We were never going to bring that up. It's not relevant, and I guarantee you'll never see it or hear it in the trial. This is just a ploy because they're losing and they know it. So essentially we thought that we could not leave this building without setting the record straight. This is preposterous and one of the worst days for justice in this county. These people are supposed to be seeking justice. And what they're doing is trying to win at all costs. And when they see they're losing, they'll do anything. We knew this all along, and today confirms it for the rest of you. If you have any questions, we'll try to answer them for you.
Johnny, do you have any idea what the law is on this issue and whether they have any kind of basis for this recusal motion?
We are going to basically research that tonight, Linda, but I think the real issue is this. We are the proponents of the evidence, and we have said we are never going to call Commander York. Or Captain York. There's no reason. She has nothing to do with this. She has nothing to do with him using the N-word. She has nothing to do with him fabricating evidence. She has nothing to do with the other things that he said on those tapes. She's only mentioned by him in a disparaging method. Let me tell you something. He not only disparages Margaret York, he disparages all the black city councilmen, says they should be lined up. He disparages all the black officers. You should hear what he refers to Wilshire Division as. All the Mexican officers who can't even write, who are on the force. He disparages everybody, women most of all. So if you start a list, he disparages the Superior Court judges. No judge will be able to listen to this case because the only people he likes are just a few white Anglo-Saxon other police officers who live under the creed. And that's what you're going to see. This is a troubled individual.
You seem to be answering what you just said just now when he said it's up to Judge Reed then to decide whether L.A. County needs to recuse itself from this case. Have you opened up something bigger than...
Has who opened up?
You, by saying that the every judge here is insulted by this? That he's
No, I have not brought the motion, Helen. This motion is brought by the prosecution. We're not going to put in his wife or the other judges. This is something they brought. We had a witness on the stand ready to proceed, so let's make that clear. This is the prosecution's motion. They're the ones doing this. We don't want any part of this. We want a jury. We want a verdict from this jury, clearly. Yes, ma'am.
If the prosecution were to succeed in asking the judge to recuse himself fully, where then do you go?
Well, if that happens, I presume, and they've got to, now you see how they're waffling. Now she says they got to go back upstairs and talk about it again tonight. Nobody knows what they're going to do. They're so desperate. And when you're desperate, you make bad decisions. So if they decide they don't want to do this, we'll come back tomorrow and I have another issue. All we want to do is try our case. If they decide they want to pursue this course, and if Judge Ito is recused after all this time, then it perhaps will result in Judge Reed or some other judge getting the case. But if they decide recusal, there's another problem for him, because it's not going to be selected by the presiding judge. It's the Judicial Council who then selects the judge. So we got a long way to go if they pursue that route.
Are you pleased with Judge Reed?
Well, it's not a question whether I'm pleased with him. I want to get this case underway. That's the issue. I want to finish this case and not be delayed by these frivolous motions. After all, it's our proffering this evidence. And why in the world would they then say they might call Captain York? Only to try to get rid of Judge Ito.
Johnny, are you in agreement that if they do call Captain York, assuming Judge Ito stays, and if they do call Captain York in rebuttal, will they have to recuse himself at that point?
Yeah, if they were going to call us a witness. But David, in order to call her, she has to have some relevant testimony. What possible relevant testimony? They've done this before. They bring up these issues, then they just die. And that's what's going to happen here. There's no relevant testimony. She wasn't with Mark Furman when he was doing all these things. So there's no relevant testimony. They only did it as a ploy. Don't you understand? That's the issue. This is a ploy that we see through right away. Everybody sees through. And somebody's got to have the courage to say it.
My wife made it clear that she thought that there was a racial incident involving Captain York, that it was all mixed up and that you could not extricate one from the other. Just saying.
She never made that clear to me, Helen. And that's not the facts. Those are not the facts.
John, can you give us an idea of what Furman did say about Captain York?
I don't think that's appropriate. I don't want to add anything this man said. It's not appropriate. We wouldn't do that. He was sick. That's how I'd characterize it. Sick.
What should this move by the prosecution accomplish for them?
Oh, I think delay. Linda, keep in mind, you hear a lot about 402 motions. The prosecution, your L.A. County district attorneys, have objected to every witness we've called in their search for truth. They try to block every witness that's beaten them over the head with evidence and facts. So why wouldn't you expect them to do this? I think they want to delay. They want to upset this jury. They would like to have a mistrial, it seems to us.
It also let me just follow up on that, Linda. It also is what we call a method of forum shopping. That is, if they're unhappy with a ruling or an expected ruling, they go to another judge. And that's exactly what's happened here. They anticipated that Judge Ito would properly admit substantial portions of this tape for impeachment on the issue of credibility. And therefore, they thought that if they went to another judge, they could get a second chance to get a ruling that may be favorable or more favorable to them.
Johnny, basically, how much of these tapes do you want to introduce? I mean, can you just sum it up in hours?
You know, it's hard to do that because the tapes are so voluminous and the incidents are so voluminous. And let me just put one other thing to rest. These tapes have nothing to do with any screenplay. This man, they are research, and he is a resource talking about what he did on a daily basis and his other officers in the car. He gives you times, examples. He names names. So, you know, for Turtle and all those people out there who haven't heard it, they ought to cut it out and come clean with the people.
But you mentioned something about hours.
Well, you know, we're very mindful that we don't want to bore this jury. But when you have more than 30 incidents where there are racial slurs, which are direct perjury, and when you have more than 17 incidents, and some of which, quite frankly, are criminal conduct that should be investigated by, if this district attorney's office doesn't have the courage to do it, by the state attorney general's office, by the Justice Department in Washington, somebody needs to investigate this. This man is going to have to be indicted somewhere along the way. So when you have all of that, you know, why should we be pressed into saying we want to do 10 minutes? This is a cornucopia, a virtual cornucopia of evidence that this jury needs to hear. And Bob's right. They'd love to try to find a judge who would go back on Judge Ito's order in January and said, oh, don't play that. But that's not going to happen. We're not going to stand for it.
Johnny, this is a racially polarized community, and the prosecution keeps accusing you of playing the race card.
Do you worry about the impact of the Furman case outside of the courtroom?
You know, George, I've lived here for a long time, and I love Los Angeles. I've been a commissioner. I worked in the government. I've been the assistant district attorney for this county. I love my community. But I also love justice. We don't go around hiding if there are racist people around who do racist things and talk about implicating innocent people. There's a bigger issue here. And so I am concerned. I hope that fair-minded people in this community will understand we need to root out this kind of thing and get to it, even if it requires another Christopher Commission based upon what they're going to hear in these tapes. That's the issue. Fair-minded citizens need to understand what this man is talking about. When that happens, I don't think there'll be any problems. It perhaps will bring us close together, because the problem right now, George, is the reason there's this great divergence is because everybody sees things based upon their life experiences. You talk to African Americans, they understand how the police act in certain communities. You talk to white people, they don't always understand it. Perhaps these tapes will help bridge that gap and bring us together so we're one community, which we should be. So do I worry? I'm always concerned about my community. But I'm concerned about my client, first of all. I'm concerned about a witness who has committed perjury. I'm concerned about getting justice in this case, because it's very important for everybody in America to understand and see that. Okay, good. That's all, George. Anything else? We're going to be gone. Okay, guys. Okay, guys. Okay, thank you.
Well, in case you just got home or haven't had a chance to see any of our coverage of the OJ Simpson trial today, and you're wondering what the heck is going on, Johnny Cochran and other members of the Simpson defense team leading a very spirited attack on word that the prosecution may end up filing a motion tomorrow to ask Judge Lance Ito to recuse himself or remove himself from the Simpson case entirely. All of this related to controversial tapes made by Detective Mark Furman, which may also involve Judge Lance Ito's wife, Captain Margaret York, who is the highest-ranking female officer in the Los Angeles Police Department.
And all of this started with the word mistrial earlier today and ended up with essentially 2 trials. CNN's Ann McDermott now tries to sort all this out.
Judge John Reed is going to re-enter the case of OJ Simpson. Last week, he handled a matter that involved a side issue and is now doing the same thing because Judge Lance Ito's wife is a police officer. This latest matter, though, clearly hit closer to home for Judge Ito.
I will love my wife dearly. And I am wounded by criticism of her. As any spouse would be. And I think it is reasonable to assume that could have some impact.
The judge's wife, Police Captain Margaret York, once worked the same division as now retired detective Mark Furman. Furman is the officer who found the bloody glove at Simpson's estate. He is also the officer the defense wants to impeach as a liar and a racist by playing tapes in which he is heard using racist words, something he swore earlier this year he didn't do. But those tapes, made in collaboration with a screenwriter for a work of fiction, also contained derogatory comments about Captain York. Earlier, Judge Reed heard an issue involving alleged leaks from police sources, but ultimately sent the matter back to Judge Ito. O.J. Simpson's defense team insisted that Judge Ito could still be fair, and attorney Johnny Cochran added he would not seek to introduce any tape that mentioned York. He went on to say Furman had so many derogatory things to say about so many people, it would be hard to find another judge.
If you want to send it to a woman, he doesn't like them. You want to send it to a black, he doesn't like them. You want to send it to a Mexican, he doesn't like them. He doesn't like anybody. Doesn't like Jews, doesn't like anyone unless they're white, Anglo-Saxon police officers.
Prosecutor Marcia Clark said she too believed Judge Ito could be fair, but added,
whether there is actual bias and whether this court will be able to actually set aside its bias is no longer an issue because the appearance has been created.
Clark then declared that the tapes should not be introduced into evidence at all, that even if they do paint Furman as a racist, they do not indicate, as the defense would have it, that Furman ever planted evidence.
There is no cover-up going on, Your Honor.
Cochran said the point is Furman lied, and the defense believes if Furman could lie about using racist words, he could lie about planting a glove to frame Simpson.
They've got to face up to this fact. This is their star witness. They vouch for him. We prove he's a liar. They know he's a liar.
However, Judge Reed will make the decision about whether or not the jurors will ever hear any of the tapes. Ann McDermott, CNN, Los Angeles.
CNN's Jim Hill joins us now live in Los Angeles with information about what's going on in Judge Reed's courtroom at this hour. Jim?
That's right. We now have two battles essentially going on in two different courtrooms. Judge Lancito tomorrow morning is going to hear arguments on whether he will have to step down as judge in the Simpson case, recuse himself altogether. Meanwhile, another judge, Judge John Reed, is going to be hearing arguments this Friday on the issue of the Furman tapes and whether they should be admitted. Also, this idea on possible testimony of Judge Lancito's wife, Captain Margaret York. Judge John Reed said this afternoon that attorneys for both sides should have their arguments ready this Friday. He will hear them at that time. He said, in the meanwhile, he will be listening to the tapes and reading the transcripts of the Furman tapes so that he can educate himself on this issue. What this boils down to really is a lot of arguing today on these very crucial issues, and the jury in the Simpson case heard no testimony today. Instead, they were outside the courtroom waiting and waiting. And here's what Judge Lancito finally told them at the end of the day.
First of all, let me apologize to you for having kept you on ice so long today. I need to discuss with you what the problem is, and because obviously you folks have volunteered to give us your time to serve as trial jurors in this case, and you're entitled to as detailed an explanation as I can give to you for the reasons behind the delay. Unfortunately, it has to do with legal issues and the admissibility of evidence, the proceedings that we've been engaged in since 9 o'clock this morning, the nature of which I cannot discuss with you. But I want you to know that it is an important decision that has to be made, and I must tell you that it involves my personal participation further in this trial. So it is a matter of concern and something that I need to deal with very carefully. And I apologize to you most sincerely on behalf of myself, the court, and the parties for the delay, but it's an issue that I have to resolve before we can proceed further.
So Judge Lancito tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock will get arguments, written arguments from each side on whether or not he should continue on the Simpson case. Prosecutors arguing he may have to recuse himself, the defense wanting very much to keep Judge Lancito. I'm Jim Hill reporting live from Los Angeles. Bobby, back to you.
And let's check in now with one of our legal analysts, Roger Cossack in Los Angeles. Roger, a lot going on in the last couple of hours. What is going on?
Bobby, this is highly unusual. We're going to find out tomorrow whether or not the prosecution will be able to convince Judge Ito whether or not he should remove himself from the rest of the trial.
I was going to ask you to go a little further with that, because did he have any real choice but to disqualify himself from the first issue involving recusal?
No, I don't think so. You know, once you find yourself as the decision maker in the unenviable position of having to make a decision that includes a member of your family, it's a no-win situation, and he has to get out and allow someone else to make these decisions. There's just nothing else he can do.
All right, Roger. Thanks. Wish we had more time.
Okay.
We'll be back in just a moment.
Oh, she's got to notice me when she comes by. I mean, look at me. What's not to notice? I'm here. I tell you, if you want to feel good, you got to look good. And if I'm going to run good, I got to feel good. Look at me. I'm designed for a high-octane gas. I love it. That's what I need. This Chevron Supreme with Tech Run. I mean, it makes me run like a champ. It's all good stuff. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
No premium outperforms new Chevron Supreme with Tech Run. Chevron, simply smarter.
I mean, I don't mean to brag or anything, but I feel stupendous.
Vital signs are stable. Everything looks good. Yeah, I think she's starting to wake up.
Mrs. Massey, can you hear me? There's someone here to see you.
Hi, Mom.
I'm hungry for excitement.
Long John Silver's presents the new Ultimate Fish Sandwich. Our famous fish fillet, tangy banana peppers, and wild jack cheese. Long John Silver's new Ultimate Fish Sandwich.
This is love.
All dairies work hard to meet high industry standards, but quality check standards are higher, so you get the fresh taste you expect from Quality Checked. Quality Check Dairies, higher standards, fresh taste.
$25 for a trim.
Investing in mutual funds is a little like getting your hair cut. It's not necessarily wise to do it yourself. In either case, the perspective and experience of a professional could prove advantageous. Alliance Capital recommends investors go to a qualified financial advisor to help solve the mystery of mutual funds.
The U.S. East Coast is bracing tonight for Hurricane Felix. At last notice, the storm was churning toward the west-northwest, some 350 miles off the coast of North Carolina. Felix is 350 miles wide, and hurricane warnings are posted all the way from Little River Inlet, South Carolina, to Chincoteague Beach, Virginia. Virginia and North Carolina have declared states of emergency and have told low-lying residents to evacuate. The U.S. Navy sent ships to sea from its big base at Norfolk, and the Air Force got its planes away from the nearby Langley base. We'll bring you developments throughout the evening.
And we apologize. The developments in the Simpson trial prevent us from bringing you further news this half hour.
That's Prime News. I'm Lyndon Soles.
And I'm Bobby Batista.
Thanks for joining us.
Hyperkeratosis? Symptom: persistent, itchy, flaky scalp. Solution: Neutrogena T-Gel. It works. Neutrogena T-Gel Shampoo.
Why didn't you see a doctor sooner? Dad's stomach was always bothering him. But the doctor had good news. The doctor said Mylanta.
For heartburn and acid indigestion, doctors recommend Mylanta most.
My doctor said Mylanta.
A sparkling ship on crystal waters is coming.
Absolutely gorgeous. It was so much fun.
The perfect lobster is coming.
Our waiters, they would do anything for us, any time.
Perfection is coming.
It's like a gift from the captain.
Memories are coming. 7 days in Royal Caribbean's Mexican Riviera are coming. You've got some Royal Caribbean coming.
Promoter Don King and the man who'll fight the former champion tonight on Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
We're first in Bullet. Bullet Federal is now First Federal Savings Bank, and that's good news for you. It means expanded and new services from one of America's strongest and safest financial institutions. It means fast approval and competitive rates on loans for any purpose, and new products like bonus banking. And it means ownership stays right here in Central Kentucky. What you've liked at Bullet will be even better at First Federal Savings Bank. You've got a great bank right here at home.
It's Kart Country. Hold everything. Kart Country still has the first and longest go-kart track with an overpass in Kentucky. But now they offer Thunder Road. Not for the weak at heart. Thunder Road. One of the largest, fastest go-kart tracks in the United States. Thunder Road. Only at Kart Country. Just south of the airport off I-65. Exit 117 Shepherdville, just past Ponderosa.
Go ahead and read. Find out who's in the crossfire. Weeknights, 7:30 Eastern on CNN.
Members of the GOP presidential field are grasping at straws in Iowa. We'll get a preview of this weekend's preference poll from David Yepsen of the Des Moines Register. Who spent the most money in election 92? And will that be repeated in 96? We'll talk with Herb Alexander, author of a new book. And we'll tell you about the broadcast battle over which party has a better prescription for saving Medicare. It's all part of Inside Politics. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Woodruff. Bernie is off tonight. Iowa is on the itinerary of many Republican presidential hopefuls today. The draw is this weekend's straw poll. Senator Phil Gramm of Texas is among those trying to make a strong showing. At the same time, he's fielding questions about a Wall Street Journal article examining his campaign's connection with Iowa's meatpacking giant, IBP Incorporated. It seems that Graham's campaign is supplying IBP with a batch of tickets to the straw poll at $25 a head and providing bus transportation for those workers who want to attend the event. The Journal says IBP, which has donated $5,000 in PAC money to Graham, has sent out a memo, quote, encouraging its management employees to take part in the Iowa poll. Graham shrugs off suggestions that there may be something improper about IBP organizing its executives for a trip to the straw poll. He notes that other candidates, including Bob Dole, are planning to bus in supporters from their home states this weekend. Yelling the loudest about the Journal article and its implications, Pat Buchanan's brigade. The candidate's sister and campaign chairman, Bay, has released a statement denouncing Graham's campaign connection with IBP as a, quote, gross insult to the Democratic ideal. She's also calling on the FEC to investigate what she describes as the senator's, quote, corporate political strategy. All this comes one day after Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania pulled out of the straw poll. His campaign maintains the event has degenerated into, quote, an exercise in big money manipulation. Well, joining us with an up-to-date overview of the political landscape in Iowa, David Yepsen. He is political editor of the Des Moines Register. David, does the Specter campaign have a point when they talk about an exercise in big money manipulation?
Well, Judy, I think Senator Specter pulling out of this straw poll is a little like me saying I'm going to pull out of the Olympics. I mean, there was never really any chance that Senator Specter was going to do very well here. He was not competing, and his campaign has had trouble taking off. But he does raise a question about legality of some of the things that are going on here, including buying of tickets by campaigns, handing them out to supporters, questions about supporters who've maxed out in their contributions, buying tickets out of state. Of course, we'll only find out whether this is legal or not a year or so from now when the FEC gets around to making rulings about it.
Well, what's been the tradition there in Iowa? I mean, has this been done before where people were bussed in from out of state and where people were buying tickets for large numbers of people?
No, there's not been a tradition of that in this state, and I do expect most of the people who are going to be at the straw poll to be Iowans. But the fact of the matter is that there are people being bussed in here from Kansas. There are people who are flying here on chartered 727s from Tennessee for Lamar Alexander's campaign. And so while they expect about 8,000 people here for this event, not all of them are going to be Iowans.
Well, so is this really a test of these candidates' strength in Iowa?
Judy, I think it's a test of their organizational skill. I mean, even if you're busing people in from out of state, if you have the ability to do that, that does reflect somewhat on your organization. And secondarily, since this is Iowa and since this is where this process starts, everyone is very mindful of Pat Robertson's showing back in '87. You'll recall he won this straw poll in '87, which told us that George Bush had some organizational troubles, and it told us that the religious conservatives were stronger than people were giving them credit for. So all the campaigns are hoping that they can use this straw poll as an organizational test for what they're doing so that all of us will stand up and take notice.
Now, what about, David, what about this story that's broken today in the Wall Street Journal about Senator Graham, that this meatpacking company, the IBP company, is arranging for its employees to be bussed in from, 3 different sites, and they're saying this is being done at the behest or being provided, rather, by the Graham campaign. Is this something, now, is this going to help Phil Graham, or now that it's been publicized, is it going to hurt him?
Judy, I don't think it's going to make any difference. I talked to Senator Graham this afternoon about this story. He says it's true. He says he's contacting all the people he knows, asking them to help out. And I don't think that there'll be that many people who will be here wearing IBP stickers for Phil Graham. So I don't think it's going to be that big. And secondly, he points out he doesn't think there's anything illegal about it. And thirdly, a lot of campaigns are doing this. They're working every network they can find in an effort to get people to this event on Saturday.
Well, now, you said a moment ago that we may be months or a year or so before we know whether the Federal Election Commission rules that some of these activities are okay or not. So that means, as far as it goes, I mean, anything goes. Is that right?
That's right, and that happens. I mean, if you look back at history, candidates all figure that they'll blow the cap in Iowa because there's no penalty for doing it. A year from now, when they get around to ruling on the legality of things that go on here, you know, they're little 2- and 3-paragraph stories buried in the back of the newspapers. And if you're a campaign trying to win Iowa, you're better off to blow the cap and take the legal heat later than obey the law now and maybe lose an election by a few votes. It has happened in past caucuses, and I expect it will happen in this one.
And you're saying it doesn't hurt any of these candidates with the voters?
No. I mean, it just doesn't become an issue. It almost becomes expected that campaigns devise ways in which to get around the caps or just outright blow them and worry about paying an FEC fine in 1997.
Let me ask you about the results that are expected. I mean, we've all been told that Senator Dole is so far ahead in Iowa that this is really just a contest for number 2. Is that really what we're talking about here, that Bob Dole is so far out front that all these other people can only hope to come in a strong second or somewhere in the middle?
Well, I do think Senator Dole has to finish first here, but I think some of Senator Dole's people who I talk to here are a little bit worried about their expectations being so high, and that in fact it wouldn't hurt them at all to have a weak first-place finish, maybe to have some of these other candidates finish a little closer to them, so that some of Senator Dole's expectations start to come down in this game. I don't know that he can finish 20 or 30 percentage points ahead of his nearest challenger, either in the caucuses or in this straw poll. If he should lose the straw poll, I think that would be a bad sign for his campaign.
Is there a chance that that could happen?
Sure, there's a chance. If his people don't execute their organization well, I really do think there's a chance that could happen, because many of the activists here are in other campaigns, other camps. If Senator Graham, if Pat Buchanan, if Lamar Alexander, who are all organizing for this straw poll, do well and Dole's people don't, sure, you could see an upset happen.
David, there's been so much criticism of straw polls in general. Does this straw poll really matter in the last analysis?
I think this straw poll is different for 2 reasons. First of all, it's larger than most straw polls. We're talking maybe 8,000 people who will participate in this. Secondly, it is a reflection of what's happening in Iowa, which is where this process begins. It doesn't end here, but it does begin here. And thirdly, because it has been an indication of organizational strength in the past and sort of a harbinger of things to come, as I mentioned, the influence of religious conservatives. So in that regard, I think as we benchmark this campaign and measure the steps along the way, it's one of many benchmarks that we have.
All right, David Yepsen, political editor of the Des Moines Register, thanks for joining us. And CNN's Inside Politics will be there covering that poll this coming Saturday. We'll talk Iowa straw poll strategy, I should say, tomorrow on Inside Politics as well. Among our guests, representatives from the Graham and the Specter presidential campaigns. Up next on Inside Politics, new on-the-air salvos in the political battle over Medicare. We'll get a sample of the ammunition. And faced with a major political decision involving race and redistricting, Georgia's officials make a request of the court.
Inside Politics is brought to you by Oldsmobile.
When something fresh comes into your life at the exact moment you're ready for it, it's not coincidence. Aurora by Oldsmobile. See what happens when you demand better? Aurora.
Something happens when you read the Wall Street Journal every business day. You start seeing opportunities where you never saw them before. See for yourself. Subscribe now to the Wall Street Journal, and you'll see that the Journal keeps you right at the heart of what's going on in business. Who's news, what's news, and how it affects you, with trends, analysis, and information to help sharpen your perspective. No matter who you are or what you do, you'll find insights and inspirations in the Journal. So when you make decisions, you'll see the forest and the trees. Call now for the Wall Street Journal, and you'll get your free guide to planning your financial future. Over 170 pages of facts, figures, and information you need to start planning a secure future right now. Get 10 weeks of the Wall Street Journal for just $38 and get the guide free.
Call now, 800-257-1257. That's 800-257-1257.
won for GOP White House hopeful Lamar Alexander. He has triumphed in his fight for a winner-take-all presidential primary in his home state of Tennessee, where he once served as governor. Under the new primary rules passed by the state GOP, 3 convention delegates will be chosen in each of Tennessee's 9 congressional districts. If you win more than 50% of the vote in a district, you take all 3 delegates. If you win more than 50% of the statewide primary total, which Alexander says he definitely hopes to do, you take all 10 of Tennessee's at-large delegates. There were more signs today of how both Democrats and Republicans are trying to make Medicare reform a major political issue and make hay in the process. The Democratic National Committee says it is launching a $1 million TV ad campaign tomorrow in 13 states. The 2 ads portray Republicans as Medicare cutters and Democrats as the program's saviors.
Medicare, lifeline for our elderly. There is a way to protect Medicare benefits and balance the budget. President Clinton, cut government waste, reduce excess spending, slow medical inflation. The Republicans disagree. They want to cut Medicare $270 billion, charging elderly $600 more a year for medical care, $1,700 more for home care. Protect Medicare benefits or cut them. A decision that touches us all.
The DNC-financed ads were produced by Bob Squire, who will be the lead media consultant in the president's re-election campaign. The Republicans are fighting fire with fire. The RNC will start airing radio ads tomorrow in the districts of 11 House Democrats, including Minority Leader Richard Gephardt. The spots claim that Democrats are doing nothing to reform Medicare, and they urge voters to take action.
Robert Betts, healthcare expert.
Medicare will be bankrupt in 7 years. That's not just my opinion. That's what the Medicare Board of Trustees said recently. And 3 of President Clinton's own cabinet members sit on this board.
Medicare's survival is at stake, and Congressman Gephardt refuses to face this danger. Congress is taking a break, and Richard Gephardt is home. Call him now at his local district office. Tell him to stop playing politics with Medicare. If we don't do something now, Medicare will be gone.
The RNC and the National Republican Congressional Committee paid for that ad. In Georgia, a plea to give the state legislature more time to redraw the state's congressional districts. Lawmakers opened a special session on redistricting yesterday in Atlanta. Today, attorneys for top state officials asked a federal court to delay drawing a new congressional map until the legislature comes up with its own plan. The state is facing an August 22nd hearing at which it must explain why the legislature, rather than the court, should draw up the new map. New ins and outs to report in the Louisiana governor's race. Former GOP Governor David Treen has dropped out, citing personal problems. He once was considered a major candidate, but reports suggest that his campaign was, quote, half-hearted. And Democrat Harry Lee has decided to seek another term as Jefferson Parish Sheriff rather than the governor's office. He reportedly has offered to repay his campaign contributors who were mostly in the gambling industry. Millionaire Democrat Robert Harvey had been raising funds for Lee. Now that Lee is out, Harvey says that he is in the race for Louisiana governor. It would be his first bid for public office. Coming up next, a man who knows the dollars and cents of campaign financing. Herbert Alexander, author of Financing the 1992 Election, will join us. Stay tuned.
In a world of intrigue.
What do you want?
A game of seduction.
What are we going to tell our superiors, Leonard? That you liked her a whole lot?
Is about to lead 3 people to the most dangerous secret of all.
She's not a spy.
If we tell them, we go to prison.
Academy Award winner Anthony Hopkins, Isabella Rossellini, and Campbell Scott, the innocent.
It's a fight between truth and lies.
Rated R. Starts Friday, September 1st in select cities.
I've always wanted to do this. With NFL Sunday Ticket on DirecTV, you get up to 13 regular season games live every Sunday. So if Washington is blowing out the Bucs, just switch to the 49ers Saints game. But hey, is Emmitt Smith breaking the rushing record? Are the Giants crushing the Eagles? You get it. Not on cable, but with DirecTV and this. Now that's a game plan. To get NFL Sunday Ticket on the 18-inch DSS dish of your choice, call 1-800-DIRECT-TV.
There are those among us with very simple tastes. They only want the best. And for them, there's Fancy Feast gourmet cat food. Exceptionally moist and delicious. Fancy Feast. Good taste is easy to recognize.
The stories, the reporters, the program. CNN presents the weekly news documentary, a full hour devoted to in-depth coverage of a single issue, with a worldwide team of investigative reporters and the time to cover the story right. 1 hour, one topic, one network. CNN presents Sunday, 9 Eastern.
As we head deeper into the presidential campaign season amid talk of campaign finance reform, there undoubtedly are lessons to be learned from the 1992 race and its political money trail. Well, joining us now is Herbert Alexander, founding director of the Citizens Research Foundation and co-author of the book Financing the 1992 Election. Mr. Alexander, I gather you've published books on every election since 1960. Tell us what was surprising, if anything, about the spending in '92.
Well, of course, the Ross Perot campaign, with one candidate spending more than $60 million of his own money, making him the largest self-contributor in American history, was outstanding. But in general terms, we found that at all levels, national, state, and local, that $3.2 billion were spent. That includes the maintenance of the political party system, and that includes ballot issues and the rest.
That's more than was ever spent before.
It's 20% more than was spent 4 years before in 1988.
For everything. This is state, local.
For everything, state, local, and federal. But while it seems like a lot of money, the two corporations with the largest advertising budgets in this country, Procter & Gamble and Philip Morris, spent more in 1992 than all our politics at all levels. And so I think one needs to look at the spending in perspective.
In other words, it sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to what's being spent on commercials on television for soap and detergent and toothpaste, cosmetics, it's less, is what you're saying.
That's exactly right. Money still remains a scarce resource in the political system. Money's always hard to raise. And while in the aggregate, $3.2 billion may sound like a lot of money, for any given candidate, it may be particularly difficult to raise what he or she thinks is necessary in order to contest effectively.
$550 million was spent, you calculated, in the presidential campaign. This is before, during the convention, and during the
Yes.
general election period. This is what, just 10% more than what was spent in 1988.
Yes.
And you said this is not much of a surprise because '88 was an open election, right?
In 1988, the White House was an open seat. For the first time in 20 years, there was no incumbent running. And so there were campaigns for nomination in both parties, Democratic and Republican. And so 1988 was particularly expensive. There was some decrease in 1992 in the pre-nomination spending because
the Republican nominee was known.
That's
it was George
right, because it was George Bush. He had a challenge from Pat Buchanan, but most of the spending was on the Democratic side, and it was not as heavy as it could have been had Mario Cuomo or Dick Gephardt or Bill Bradley
gotten in earlier.
As it was, even Bill Clinton got in late and got the nomination really on the cheap.
What was all this money spent on? I mean, I think most people can guess.
Of course, a good deal of it is spent on media, but one depends
television advertising?
Well, it depends whether one's talking about the pre-nomination period or the general election period. In the general election period, that is after the conventions, after the major parties nominate their candidates, there's heavy spending on television, and Clinton spent in excess of $32 million on television in the months from August to November election. But in the pre-nomination period, not as much is spent on television, although some is, because there's some element of retailing politics in Iowa and in New Hampshire.
The door-to-door.
Where the door-to-door, the shopping mall to restaurant kind of campaigning goes on. But when one gets into the bigger states, New York or California, Illinois, then of course the mass media becomes essential.
Let me ask you this. The fact that Ross Perot was in there and spending, as you put, $60-some-odd million of his own money, does this say to us that if you're wealthy, that you inevitably have some advantage in American presidential politics?
Well, there's no question that there's a real advantage for a candidate spending his or her own money. And certainly Ross Perot exhibited that through his on-again, off-again campaign in 1992. But if you were to ask Perot about whether he was trying to buy an election, he would say he was trying to sell himself. And he did say he wasn't dipping into the public treasury the way candidates Bush and Clinton were through the tax checkoff money for public funding. And I remember...
So he was saying he was saving the taxpayers.
Well, he was saving the taxpayers, and Perot was also saying that he was spending the money for the American people to bring certain issues before the people.
Let me ask you about one thing you found, I gather, about the Democrats and about the Bill Clinton campaign, and that is that they raised more money than some might have thought, and in particular the soft money, the so-called, the money that's raised that goes to the party for get out the vote and related things. Is this the sort of effort that one would expect the Democrats to do well again in 1996, or is that possible to say?
Well, so far this year, the Democrats are doing very well in raising soft money, and it's a surprise because the Clinton presidency is not the most popular, and the Republicans now control both houses of Congress.
So why do you think that is? Why are they having success?
Well, you know, Bill Clinton is still president and is going to be till the rest of his term. Whether he's reelected or not is another question. And so, you know, a lot of soft money comes in, but that is money raised outside the restraints of federal law and is used mainly at the state and local levels on activities such as registration and get out the vote.
All right. Herbert Alexander, author of Financing the 1992 Election. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next on Inside Politics, speaking of the Clintons, they kick off their summer vacation. Can one call a stay at a Rockefeller retreat roughing it?
Do you know this name? It has a familiar ring to more than 1 million phone customers around the country. And established success in the fast-moving cellular industry. It's also the name behind a growing number of worldwide information services, putting it near the top of the list in financial performance. So remember, Alltel Corporation. It's a name that could mean a lot for you.
A sparkling ship on crystal waters is coming.
Absolutely gorgeous. It was so much fun.
The perfect lobster is coming.
Our waiters, they would do anything for us, any time.
Perfection is coming.
It's like a gift from the captain.
Memories are coming. 7 days in Royal Caribbean's Caribbean are coming. You've got some Royal Caribbean coming.
Something happens when you read the Wall Street Journal every business day. You start seeing opportunities where you never saw them before. See for yourself. Subscribe now to the Wall Street Journal, and you'll see that the Journal keeps you right at the heart of what's going on in business. Who's news, what's news, and how it affects you, with trends, analysis, and information to help sharpen your perspective. No matter who you are or what you do, you'll find insights and inspirations in the Journal. So when you make decisions, you'll see the forest and the trees. Call now for the Wall Street Journal, and you'll get your free guide to planning your financial future. Over 170 pages of facts, figures, and information you need to start planning a secure future right now. Get 10 weeks of the Wall Street Journal for just $38 and get the guide free.
Call now, 800-257-1257. That's 800-257-1257.
On the next National Geographic Explorer, they've gone face-to-face with the largest carnivore on Earth, bear attacks. Join TBS for the last great adventure of the weekend, National Geographic Explorer, 9 Eastern Sunday night, only on TBS.
From our Politics and Strange Bedfellows file, Republican Senator Alphonse D'Amato got a plug for his new book today from controversial radio personality Howard Stern. Stern says that he read Pasta, Power, and Politics, and he liked it. He says he admires D'Amato in part because D'Amato supports New York Governor George Pataki, and Stern apparently is a Pataki fan. Stern and D'Amato squeezed in the photo opportunity while the senator signed copies of his book in New York. Finally, the President and First Lady are officially on vacation. Bill and Hillary Clinton have arrived in Wyoming. They'll be staying for 2 weeks in Jackson Hole at the ranch owned by Senator Jay Rockefeller of West Virginia. White House spokesman Mike McCurry says the President plans to hike, ride horses, read, raft, and maybe even go camping. Savoring the public relations possibilities, McCurry said, quote, "I'd love it, Bill and Hill in a tent under the stars." No word on whether the press secretary goes along. That's all for this edition of Inside Politics. I'm Judy Woodruff. Larry King Live is next. Thanks for watching.
Guilty. Not guilty. Weekdays this fall, the burden of proof rests on CNN.
Go ahead and read what's on the screen.
iMart Family Vision Care.
How about now?
iMart is different from those crowded vision centers. At iMart, you deal directly with the owners, Dr. Terry L. Goodman and Bob Thompson.
That's right. I'm Dr. Goodman.
And I'm Bob Thompson.
Here at iMart, we believe in customer care. Come in and ask about our special. Buy one, get one free. Going on right now.
So visit us at either location.
Last Saturday, my wife Lisa and I went shopping. You know, we're not paying any attention. That's when it hit me. What would happen to our family if Lisa weren't around anymore?
Recently, I've been trying to get Dave and Lisa to review their life insurance.
We then called Kim. She's our nationwide insurance agent.
Now Lisa has the coverage she needs.
Thanks to Kim, I don't worry about what might happen.
For all of your insurance needs in Bullitt County, call nationwide agent Jim Marsh.
This is CNN.
The Simpson trial comes to a grinding halt when Judge Ito says he can't rule on the Furman tapes. Can the jurors stand another delay? And Vegas oddsmakers call McNeely a long shot. Tonight, he tells us how he plans to knock out Mike Tyson. Plus, he began singing when he was 6, and decades later, the name means Mr. Las Vegas, Wayne Newton. All ahead on Larry King Live.
Now, live from Washington, here's Larry King.
Good evening. Mike Tyson tomorrow night in the ring in Las Vegas. Every time you say they can't top this, they top it. Reporting from Los Angeles, Bert Katz, former California Superior Court Judge. Jeffrey Toobin of the New Yorker, he was with us last night. We expected to see him next week. He's back already. And our man on the scene, Jim Moret. William Bendix in The Life of Riley, Jim, used to say, what a revolting development this is, isn't it?
Well, it's dramatic, to be sure. I'll try to give you a thumbnail sketch if I can.
Quickly, yes. Let's get it all in order here.
Okay. Judge Lancito recused himself or removed himself from the Simpson trial as to two issues. One, to decide the admissibility of the so-called Furman tapes, and two, to decide whether or not his wife, LAPD Captain Margaret York, is a material witness, because Furman references her and makes derogatory statements about her on those Furman tapes. So Judge Ito sends it to another judge who's going to decide those issues, but then later today in Ito's courtroom, Marcia Clark effectively drops a bombshell. She says the prosecution is considering asking the judge, Judge Lancito, to remove himself entirely from the Simpson case. There will be arguments on that tomorrow morning.
In a press conference, Bert, right after all this goings on, Mr. Simpson's team, led by Mr. Cochran and others, literally went berserk over this, charging all sorts of things. Are they on the mark?
Well, I can certainly understand their wrath about this. I mean, the whole point is that they've allowed Ito to refer the case out to Reed before, and no one objected. And when Reed kicked it back to Ito, there was nothing wrong with it. But now, because of the Furman permutations, we now have some other problems, and I think that the defense thinks this is dirty pool. The bottom line is, Larry, that the code provision under CCP 173 says that where a judge finds a conflict and asks to recuse himself for that conflict, that it doesn't talk about a partial recusal, it talks about a total recusal, and therefore the issue arises to whether or not you can have a partial recusal as opposed to a total one.
Jeffrey, what on earth does mentioning his wife have to do with the evidence of perjury or using the word nigger?
Well, it is potentially a problem here, because in these tapes, according to what the lawyers have represented in court, Furman says some really terrible things about Judge Ito's wife, and that creates a potential problem for Ito, in that the perception might be that he is somehow biased against Furman and that he wants to see Furman demolished on the stand, or conversely, that he wants to bend over backwards to be fair to Furman because of what he said about his wife. That's the appearance problem that's generated.
I would disagree. I think the appearance problem is that inasmuch as there were derogatory and pejorative statements made against Ito's wife, that the likelihood would be that he'd be inclined to find in favor of allowing more evidence in that tape rather than less.
Forget all that, though. What, Jim Moret, does his wife, even he may have spoken about the wife, have to do with this case? Why should it even come up?
Well, it comes up in two areas. First of all, and I have to remind you that some months ago, she signed a declaration that stated, even though she was Mark Furman's superior officer at the LAPD station in West Los Angeles, she didn't remember Furman. She didn't remember any altercations with him. If, as the defense says, these tapes indicate Furman's true behavior, then Judge Ito's wife may have a problem with respect to what she said already. But the prosecution says that she is relevant because they want to bring her in to show that these events never happened. Therefore, everything on these tapes is simply an act of fiction because he was writing a screenplay with someone.
Jeffrey, is this a move by the prosecution to get Ito out when they know Ito was going to let those tapes in?
That is what the defense is charging. I think tomorrow morning, I don't really think that's true. I think that's an excessively cynical view of the prosecution.
What do you think is going to happen tomorrow morning?
I think they are going to come in tomorrow morning and say, we thought about this a lot and we actually think a partial recusal is okay. I don't think they're going to ask to have Ito thrown off the case. I think that, by and large, Ito has been good to the prosecution, and I think the chaos that would be generated by having a new judge at this point would be too extreme.
See, Larry, I'm thinking in terms of why their strategy to try and now get rid of Ito when they get two bites at the apple. They let Reed, who was a conservative district attorney, and now he's a judge, could make the ruling that might favor the prosecution, restricting the scope of the content of matter that will go before the jury, and then send it back to Ito, who's been fairly good to the prosecution. So I don't understand their strategy at this point.
But Jim, logically, if that testimony doesn't come in about what he had to say about the N-word, there would be an uproar, wouldn't there? Because we all know he said it. Everybody says he said it, including the prosecution.
Well, the prosecution, in fact, offered a stipulation, an agreement with the defense today. They said, okay, we'll stipulate. We'll agree that he used that N-word in 1985, 86, and 87, which the defense says is tantamount to the prosecution admitting that Furman lied on the stand. Clearly, the defense wants the jury to hear these tapes.
Bert, should he be charged? Should Furman be charged with perjury by the prosecution?
Well, first of all, I can't speak to that because I haven't heard the tapes and I don't know the context in which the statements are made.
Assuming, since everyone now says he did say the word, isn't it an open and shut case of perjury?
Well, perjury is always very difficult because he still may have a good faith defense in that he said he didn't understand the context in which the question was asked by Bailey. Now, I realize that that may not be a great answer, but at least it's a good answer in terms of whether or not the prosecution has the ability to prove beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty that he willfully committed perjury.
Jim, do we have a rogue cop here?
It depends on who you talk to. Clearly, the prosecution knows they've got a problem with Mark Furman, only so far as the jury believing that he's a racist, because the prosecution has said accurately, look, even if he is a racist, you have to show that he had the opportunity to plant evidence, and there's been no showing of that so far. But clearly the perception is a problem for the prosecution, and he's admitted, or the prosecution's admitted, he said some horrible things on these tapes. We haven't heard the tapes, the judge hasn't heard the tapes, but the prosecution and defense both admit that these tapes have some very powerful, damaging evidence.
Jeffrey, apparently he also said, there's been no contradiction of this, that it's okay to plant evidence.
Well, and that is why I don't see how a judge can keep these tapes out. There may be an explanation for what he was saying, but if you have a man who's been charged with planting evidence admitting that it's okay to plant evidence or that he's done it, I don't see any judge, Reed or Ito, having any alternative but letting that tape in.
Larry, I have to totally agree with Jeff. I mean, it goes right to the heart of the issue of conspiracy, and I think it would have to come in. And, you know, the problem is, you can see Marcia Clark trying to distance herself a little bit. Now, as you say, in a sense, you're getting the feeling, well, even if he lied, you know, about this, all right, yeah, he lied about this, we're not happy about it, this is not a good person, that's bad character, but show me the nexus between those statements and putting that glove on the side, or the blood on the Bronco.
Plus, Larry, don't forget, even though the admissibility issue is still out there, Judge Ito found that these tapes are material. That's why he sent Johnny Cochran to North Carolina with that subpoena. So this information is material. It's relevant. Whether it's admissible is another question.
We'll take a break, come back and include your phone calls. Then we'll meet Don King and Peter McNeely and then Wayne Newton. Tomorrow night, Mike Tyson. Then Thursday in Los Angeles with Judge Jack Tenner. Friday, Milt Grimes. Hosts a great guest. Lots of surprises. And we'll be there all next week. And by the way, Monday night, Bill Gates of Microsoft for a full hour on Larry King Live. Don't go away.
There's no respect for anyone. So I'm just pointing out to you that it's not going to be easy for you. If you want to send it to a woman, he doesn't like them. You want to send it to a black, he doesn't like them. You want to send it to a Mexican, he doesn't like them. He doesn't like anybody. Doesn't like Jews, doesn't like anyone unless they're white Anglo-Saxon police officers. And that's the problem.
Oh, Hudson, ready to try a macho deodorant soap? Nah. Then try Ivory. It doesn't have stuff like heavy perfumes, dyes, or deodorants. Because we think a baby should smell like a baby. Clean. Ivory, the clean.
One novel, 250 passengers, one killer virus. Flight 66 is now a hot zone. Pandora's Clock, the hottest thriller of the year. Pandora's Clock. There is no antidote for terror.
We changed the way you saw the world. Now we've made a world of changes. Introducing the new Ford Explorer. The top-selling compact sport utility with standard dual airbags. The one with control track four-wheel drive for instant traction control automatically. Plus an engine that lets you go 100,000 miles before your first tune-up. The new Ford Explorer. Far and away, the best the world has to offer.
To unlock the full potential of your PC, you need the remarkable speed and capability of Microsoft Windows 95. Unfortunately, you can't buy it anywhere until August 24th. But there is a solution. Come to Office Depot now or call us and we'll reserve a copy for you. That way, you're guaranteed a copy of Windows 95 when they do go on sale. while everyone else is scrambling to buy theirs.
Taking care of business.
The stories, the reporters, the program. CNN presents the weekly news documentary, a full hour devoted to in-depth coverage of a single issue, with a worldwide team of investigative reporters and the time to cover the story right. 1 hour, one topic, one network. CNN presents, Sunday, 9 Eastern.
We're back on Larry King Live. Before we go to calls, if memory serves me correctly, Mr. Toobin, I don't know if it was you, but many pundits really had a field day with F. Lee Bailey, saying that he missed the mark in his cross-exam of Detective Furman. It appears that may not be now true.
Well,
should we reevaluate him? Did he nail him?
Well, the one thing he did, and this was said at the time, is that he really tied Mark Furman down on the issue of whether he'd use the word nigger.
Isn't that now turning into one of the key factors in this case? And does Bailey deserve a little reprieve here?
Well, Bailey deserves a little reprieve, no question. And also, I think the prosecution, remember, objected to that whole line of inquiry. And Judge Ito allowed Bailey to ask the questions about the use of the word. That is going to loom as perhaps one of the biggest decisions in this case.
Well, I'm not. One point, the prosecution actually did not object at the time when the questions were asked about the use of the N-word. I understood the scope of Ito's ruling was that it related to any racist attitude that would suggest that he would plant evidence against a mixed couple. That was the parameters within which the Ito ruling occurred. But, you know, on your very show, Larry, I had said that I thought that Bailey actually was brilliant when it came to his cross-examination. I couldn't understand why the pundits were against him.
Not many did, though, right, Jim Murray?
Not many did, but you have to remember one thing, that no one, including the defense and including F. Lee Bailey, knew about these tapes at the time. So hindsight is a wonderful thing. Bailey did clearly tie him down and lock him up. Furman said he never used that word in the last 10 years.
Bailey picked out 10 years. He emphasized 10 years. He said, you've never said the word. He repeated it twice. You don't think Bailey knew anything?
I don't think he did.
Well, he did know about Kathleen Bell. Remember, there were other witnesses who had surfaced by that point.
Okay, let's get some calls. Phoenix, Arizona, with Bert Katz, Jeffrey Toobin, Jim Murray. Hello.
Hello. Larry, I'm wondering, you know, when we heard the 911 tapes, everybody kind of, they heard the tapes, they saw the pictures, and we drew a lot of conclusions from that. We said, well, you know, we've all heard of situations where husbands have ended up killing their wives after they've left them, especially in these abusive, possessive type relationships. And everybody said, no, you can't draw those type of conclusions. That's a leap of faith. There's no evidence to prove that. But yet now it seems like the public in general and a lot of the defense lawyers are drawing this conclusion that from the fact that Mark Furman has used racial epithets or even that he's a racist, that he planted evidence.
Is there a leap of that, Jeffrey?
That's going to be the defense.
Yeah.
It's funny, I'm using the term defense when I'm talking about the prosecution. Yeah, but I think that's indicative of how the trial has gone recently. The question that the prosecutors are going to focus on is, even if Mark Furman is the worst person in the world, could he have planted this glove? Did he have the opportunity? Did he have the time? That's what the prosecution is going to have to say, and they may even have to say, which would be disastrous for them, well, assume he did plan it, but look at all the rest of the evidence.
London,
that's how
hello.
much the prosecution's on the defensive here.
London, England, hello.
Hello. Yes, my question is regarding the Marcia Clark trying to keep the Furman tapes cover-up from the jury, and the fact that Johnny Cochran mentioned today that several or a lot of Furman files have either recently been sealed or are missing. Do we really have a right in front of the whole world to see kind of a Marcia-gate here?
Jim?
Oh, that's a tough question. I don't know that you have Marcia Clark involved in any of this. This is the LAPD sealing off its files. You had a separate court hearing. The internal affairs documents were deemed by the court not to be material, not to be relevant. So I think you've got a lot of things really in play here.
I think there may have been a little hyperbole on Johnny Cochran's part today. I don't believe there's been any unethical behavior proved by the prosecutors in this case.
I totally concur in that.
We'll be back with our remaining moments, take some more phone calls, and then meet Don King and the man who wants to fight Mike Tyson, Peter McNeely. All that after this.